Chapter 21:14. Mu Yanqing? Was he really going to take over the position? If this lad could be even half as good as Mu Yaja, the crowd would not have such complicated feelings. Mu Linfeng could not help but call out, "Yaja." Mu Yaja's back paused. Yun Shishir glanced at him, only to see him turn around expressionlessly. He sneered and said, "All these years in the Mu family I've been cautious and did my best. Now that I've fallen to this state, I've saved your last bit of face. But don't forget that without me, the Mu family's empire will eventually become a wasteland. Today I've walked out of this door. From this moment on, the survival of the Mu family no longer has anything to do with me. If the Mu family faces any difficulties in the future, don't crawl over to me with that pitiful face of yours." As soon as he finished speaking, his cold and oppressive gaze swept across everyone present. Finally, he retracted his gaze and left with Yun Shishir in his arms without looking back. Such heartless words had undoubtedly forced Mu Linfeng's last attempt to persuade him to stay back into his stomach. Resolute and domineering, this was him. Mu Linfeng seemed to have lost all his strength as he slumped on the chair. No one knew whether he was feeling happy or worried at this moment. Mu Yaja had left. At this moment, the Mu family's empire could be considered to have collapsed. He had gathered so many people and set up a hongmen banquet, but it was never for such an outcome. At most, he wanted to threaten him. At least, even if Yun Shishir had to be a concubine, he would be happy to see it happen. But it was definitely not for such an outcome. Mu Shumin could not feel happy anymore. Mu Yaja's ruthless words before he left were a huge blow to her. She actually started to worry. With his ruthless methods, he would definitely not give up after leaving the Mu family. He would definitely use some tricks to trip up the Mu family. This was not the outcome she wanted to see. She had originally thought that forcing him to abdicate would be an extremely difficult task. A man with a strong desire for control like him would hold on tightly to power and not let go. However, they did not expect that a man who would do anything in the business world, who would do anything and everything, would rise to the top despite all the criticism and doubts. He used absolutely ruthless methods and almost swept away thousands of soldiers. He changed all the people in Mu Group. His ambition, his methods, and his boldness still made people feel a lingering fear in their hearts even until now. Such a man for a woman actually let go just like that. Isn't this too unbelievable? Until now, everyone felt as if they were in a dream, and it was difficult for them to regain their senses. It was hard to imagine that the current Mu Group had already lost its leader. Just a moment ago, everything that had changed had been overturned with just a single thought. Mu Yanqing was obviously very excited. He looked around and saw that everyone was silent. He then glanced at Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng, who appeared to be indifferent. Hence, he reminded her indirectly, "Aunt, since he has already stepped down from his position as the head of the household, then next, it was time to announce the new head of the household." He was already itching to make a move, and his ambition was restless. He was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to wave his hand, and logically, he would be able to inherit the position of the head of the household in front of all the elders. Mu Shumin bit her lip and did not say a word. Mu Yanqing could not help but feel disappointed. What was she thinking? Hurry up and announce what's next? Didn't Auntie agree? Chapter 21:15. What was he thinking? Hurry up and announce the next step. Didn't they agree that once Mu Yaja abdicated, it would be his turn to take over? Mu Yanqing looked impatient. Seeing that Mu Shumin did not say anything, he turned to look at Mu Linfeng. "Second uncle, what should we do next?" Someone at the side reacted and immediately suggested, "That's right. Since Mu Yaja has abdicated, we should support a new candidate for the position of the family head." Following this person's suggestion, the others seemed to have recovered their spirits and continued, "Second brother, you have the most seniority. Before this, you should have found a new candidate for the family head." "That's right. I think second brother has a candidate in mind. Look, isn't Yanqing the best candidate? I heard that second brother intends to support Yanqing to take over. This is a good choice." Mu Yanqing listened to the flattery and puffed out his chest with a smug look on his face. He was full of ambition and was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to give the order so that he could take over the family head in a grand manner. This was the moment that he had been dreaming of all this time. Mu Shumin also reacted and said, "Second brother, you decide on a candidate." Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was feeling complicated and lost interest. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. No matter how he thought about it, he felt extremely regretful. This was not the outcome he wanted. Therefore, his attitude towards the suggestion of another family head was indifferent. He said indifferently, We'll talk about the family head's decision another day. I'm a little tired today. Upon hearing this, Mu Yanqing instantly wilted. His morale was low and he bit his lip indignantly. Needless to say, he felt so wronged. He cast a helpless gaze on Mu Shumin. He wanted to say something but he did not, hinting with his eyes. Was there a need for another day? It was rare for everyone to gather here. Now that everyone was here, why not take advantage of the situation and support him to take over the family head? Originally, since Mu Yaja had said such harsh words, it could be said that he had severed all ties with the Mu family. Even if he regretted it, it was too late to salvage the situation now. Since such a proud and aloof man had said such harsh words, he would definitely not come back. On the Mu family's side, no one would lower themselves to beg him to come back. Today's situation had already been decided. Next, the matter of choosing a new patriarch could be said to be imminent. But at this juncture, what was the point of hesitating? Mu Yanqing could not wait any longer. After all, there might be some unforeseen changes after tonight. If there were any changes and another Qing Yaojin appeared, then all his efforts would be in vain. Would it not be all for someone else's benefit? One had to know that the news hadn't spread yet. If this news were to spread throughout the Mu Jia, his peers would be eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. How could Mu Yanqing restrain himself? He might as well take advantage of this situation and go with the flow. Before this, Mu Yanqing couldn't wait any longer. Taking advantage of Mu Yaja's meeting, he sneaked into the CEO's office. Sitting on the chair that symbolized the highest position, his heart was burning hot. He stroked the mahogany desk and thought comfortably that in the future, this place would become his world. All this while, he had been thinking about this place for a long time. Once he sat on it, it was like sitting on a dragon's throne. He hoped that he would be able to fulfill his wish one day. Chapter 21:16. Give me some time to think about this matter carefully. We can't be rash about the succession of the family head. There's no rush. With that, Mu Linfeng slowly stood up and left with a worried expression, leaning on his cane. That day, when Mu Shumin came to him and mentioned this matter, Mu Linfeng actually disapproved of Mu Yanqing. Although Mu Shumin agreed and supported Mu Yanqing in Mu Linfeng's eyes, it was just a woman's view. He did not think that Mu Yanqing was qualified to succeed the family head. He did not have the ability or the responsibility to take on the position. The reason why he gathered everyone and called Mu Yanqing over today was to use him to provoke Mu Yaja. He hoped to make Mu Yaja aware of the crisis and let him know that he was not the only one who could take on the position of the family head. He was originally sure that this kid, despite his fierce mouth, would be able to distinguish the pros and cons clearly and would not make a mistake. However, later on, Mu Linfeng realized that Yun Shishir occupied such an important position in his heart. He was wrong, ridiculously wrong. In just one night, his chances of winning were gone. Without Mu Yaja, half of the Mu group had indeed collapsed. This time, it was his turn to feel uncomfortable. This brat was quite carefree, wasn't he? He was sure that without him, the Mu group would be in chaos. Others did not understand, but Mu Linfeng knew very well that the Mu group was going to experience a bloodbath in the coming days. So, what a miscalculation. After Mu Linfeng left, Mu Yanqing forced himself to remain calm on the surface, but inside he was angry and anxious. He originally thought that it would be his turn to take over the family head, but Mu Linfeng left just like that. What was he? He had schemed and plotted for so long. In the end, there wouldn't be any changes, right? He keenly sensed that Mu Linfeng was not satisfied with him and was obviously unwilling to hand over the family head position to him. Then who did he want to support? Could it be that all his hard work was for naught? When Mu Shumin saw him suppressing his dissatisfaction and forbearance, she too felt a little guilty, so she secretly consoled him. Your second uncle hasn't adjusted his mentality properly. Once tonight is over, I'll ask him again and see if he has any plans for the next step. This matter can't be rushed. Even if he announces today that he will support you, the position won't be stable and won't be stable. There's no need to rush. Mu Yanqing felt wronged. Second uncle doesn't approve of me? Or do you think that I'm not qualified and not as outstanding as second brother? Yanqing, don't let your thoughts run wild. Especially at a time like this, we can't afford to be flustered. Okay, aunt, I'll listen. Mu Yanqing took a step back and compromised. Mu Shumin smiled. After leaving the Mu residence on the way home, Mu Yaja sat in the back seat with Yu in his arms. However, he did not seem to be in a good mood. From the beginning to the end, he looked out of the window and remained silent. Yun Shishir's heart sank when she saw this. He was definitely not in a good mood tonight. It was not that he was reluctant to part with her, but after all, he was giving up so many years of hard work. Naturally, he felt uncomfortable. She slowly placed her hand on the back of his hand. Chapter 21:17. Are you very sad? She asked softly, looking a little guilty. After all, it was because of her that things had turned out this way. She couldn't help but feel guilty. Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and kept quiet. Muyaja said in a low voice, "Don't let your imagination run wild. I don't feel upset." Even though he was comforting her, Yun Shishir still felt a little lost. Yu suddenly said, "Daddy, you still have Mommy? You still have Xiao Yichen and me. We are your strongest supporters." It didn't matter if he didn't say anything, but the moment he spoke, Yun Shishir suddenly reacted. She suddenly turned her gaze and stared at him. She said darkly, "Yu, I think you should be honest with Mommy." Yu tilted his head and deliberately acted cute. He looked confused and his gaze was blank. "Mommy, what do you want me to explain? What's going on today?" "Today?" Yu continued to act cute. He blinked his big watery eyes as if he didn't understand her words. Yun Shishir snorted coldly and reached out to pinch his ear. "Wah!" Yu cried out pitifully, "Mommy? Mommy, let go. It hurts. Hurry up and tell me the truth. What do you mean by flattening Mu Corporation? Where did you get the confidence to say such bold words?" Xiao Yichen said leisurely, "Yu, hurry up and tell me the truth. Otherwise, you will die in Mommy's hands tonight." Yu immediately asked Muyaja for help. Daddy, help me." Muyaja ignored him and said airily, "Be good and tell me the truth." He wasn't going to clean up his own mess. "Are you still thinking about asking for help?" Yun Shishir smiled and tightened her grip. Yu couldn't take it anymore. He said with tears in his eyes, "Mommy, it hurts. Calm down and listen to my explanation." "Okay." Yun Shishir let go of him and crossed her arms elegantly. She smiled calmly and said, "I'll give you a chance to explain." Sucking in a deep breath of cold air, Yu proceeded to explain his background in one breath. Of course, he omitted the background of the Hurricane Group. The reason why he avoided talking about this identity was because he didn't want to agitate her too much. Step by step. If he was too shaken, he was afraid that his mommy wouldn't be able to accept the truth. When he was 5 years old, he officially took over as the chief shareholder of Wuxia Holdings. When he became the CEO and appointed Li Hanlin as a special director, his net worth rose to more than 1 billion yuan. When Wuxia Holdings got listed, its market value was estimated to reach an unprecedented scale. After saying all this, Yu sighed. "Although Wuxia Holdings may not be able to compete with the Mu Corporation, we won't let them do whatever they want to us. Mommy, I just want you to know that we are not that easy to bully." Yun Shishir was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Wuxia Holdings? Wuxia Holdings. Wasn't that the world's #1 toy supplier? She had seen the news that Wuxia Holdings was going to be listed and it was reported on China Central News. She had always been passionate about Wuxia Holdings products. She bought most of the gifts for Yu and Xiao Yichen from Wuxia's flagship store. Chapter 21:18. What, 5 years old? 5 years old. Now he was the legal representative of Wuxia and owned a considerable amount of shares. Was she dreaming? When Yu saw that Yun Shishir was in a daze, he waved his hand curiously in front of her eyes. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Muyaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but chuckle as he scratched her nose affectionately. Only then did she regain her senses. Still, she glanced at him in disbelief and muttered, "I can't believe it." Yu patted her shoulder comfortingly and said meaningfully, "Mommy, you have to believe that anything is possible. I can't believe that you're my biological son." Yun Shishir muttered the second half of her sentence. Yu was dumbfounded. Yun Shishir held Yu's little face in her hands and looked at him from left to right. Then she recalled how high-spirited Yu was when he was at the Mu residence. He was arrogant, bold, and heroic. However, when she looked at the obedient and cute little boy in front of her, Yun Shishir felt that the whole world was spinning. She couldn't believe it. Could she say that she didn't believe it? He dominated the toy market at 7 years old. He was only 7 years old. When she was 7 years old, she was still playing with mud with Xiao Jia. She couldn't believe that such a genius son had come from her womb. Wasn't there a saying called genetic mutation? Then why was Yu the only one who had a mutation but Xiao Yichen? He couldn't even do basic arithmetic. Ah no, Xiao Yichen was also very amazing. She had seen him carry a washing machine with her own eyes, yet he was able to carry it on his shoulders with such a small body. What kind of crazy pair did she give birth to? Xiao Yichen looked at Yun Shishir's stunned expression and laughed out loud. Ah. You scared mommy? Ah. Yu said innocently, Mommy, I'm too smart. It's not my fault. Yun Shishir tried her best to hold her head and closed her eyes tightly, signaling him to keep quiet. Baby, let mommy calm down. Mommy can't digest what you've said for a while. Yes. Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something and asked suspiciously, the agent Li you're talking about? The one you always thought was the principal. Headmaster Li. Yun Shishir's eyes widened. He's your director? Aha. Yu crossed her arms and nodded. I'm also your personal assistant. No wonder. She had always thought that Li Hanlin was the principal of the kindergarten and that he cared for Yu so much because he liked him. Yun Shishir's heart was still pounding. There were times when Yu would often express his annoyance towards Li Hanlin, but Li Hanlin would not take it to heart. Instead, Li Hanlin would tremble with fear. At that time she was already confused. Now that she thought about it, that was just a subordinate's way of showing his respect to his superior. There were times when she thought that Yu's attitude towards Li Hanlin was very arrogant, but Li Hanlin still acted exceptionally magnanimous. Now that she thought about it, it was all because he was afraid that Yu would deduct his bonus as a subordinate. It was no wonder. Had there ever been a principal who cared so much about a student whom he had never met before? This kind of love seemed to have gone beyond logic. Now that she thought about it, Yun Shishir suddenly felt as though she had been kept in the dark from the beginning. Chapter 21:19. Yun Shishir glared at him coldly. Suddenly, she pinched his face unhappily and said gloomily, Boy, how dare you lie to me and say that he is the principal of the kindergarten? How dare you lie to mommy? Ouch, ouch, ouch. Yu hugged her hand and begged for mercy. Mommy, please spare me. Mommy, I was wrong. Yun Shishir pretended to be angry and said, If it weren't for what happened today, I don't know when you would have come clean with me. Sob, sob, sob. Mommy, I was wrong. Please spare me, okay? Yu put his hands together and begged for mercy again and again. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but snicker. You made mommy angry. Who asked you to hide it from mommy? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a somewhat cold gaze fall on him. Xiao Yichen slowly turned his eyes and saw Yun Shishir looking at him coldly. She pursed her lips and said, Oh? So you knew about it too. You hid it from me with Yu. Without waiting for little Yichen's explanation, Yun Shishir's hand reached over and mercilessly pinched his little ear. Sob, 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 sob. Mommy, let me go. What did I do wrong? Xiao Yichen felt wronged and teared up. He felt that he had been implicated. Accomplice. Mommy, I didn't hide it from you on purpose. You asked me to hide it from you and not tell you. Yun Shishir looked at Yu and narrowed her eyes. Yu quickly begged for mercy and said, That's because I didn't want mommy to worry. Yu broke free from her grip and held her hand instead. He placed his hand on the back of her hand and the grievance on his face suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a dazzling tenderness. Mommy, I know you're angry and worried. That's why I didn't dare to tell you the truth. No matter what my identity is, I'm still that sensible and obedient Yu by my mommy's side. That will never change. Mommy, I'm working hard to become stronger by hook or by crook at all costs. I just want to protect you better and not let you be bullied by anyone. I've had enough of being weak, helpless, isolated, and bullied. Although some of the memories happened when I was very young, they were still deeply etched in my mind. I don't want such a nightmare to accompany you for the rest of your life. His words were incomparably sincere. Yu looked at her gently. Suddenly, she reached out her little hand and grabbed Muyaja's hand. She replaced herself and gently placed her hand on the back of Yun Shishir's hand. Then he turned his head and exchanged a smile with Xiao Yichen. The two little fellows gently placed their little hands on her. In the future, let's never be separated again, okay? Before Yu could finish speaking, Yun Shishir's face was already covered in tears. She tried her best not to show her weak side in front of the little munchkin. She widened her eyes and tried in vain to force back her tears. But she couldn't help it. These simple words were so touching. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Initially, when this little fellow fearfully confessed his identity to her, Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was obviously very angry, but she also felt a little heartache and helplessness. At the same time, she also felt a great sense of loss and defeat. So Xiao Bao, who she had always doted on, was already such a formidable person. He was clearly still such a young child, but he was already able to hold up half the sky. And she, as his guardian, still relied on his protection at this crucial moment. Chapter 21:20. Yun Shirshir did not feel good about it. Perhaps no mother would feel happy about this. Right now, her heart was filled with guilt, loneliness and bitterness. With tears in her eyes, Yun Shirshir hugged the two little munchkins and closed her eyes. From an angle where the two little munchkins could not see, she let her tears flow freely. She probably could not be considered a good mother. Muyaja's heart was also touched. There had never been a time when his heart was as hot as tonight. There had never been a time when he felt that the hearts of the four of them were so close. At this moment he suddenly felt that he was like a tall mountain, towering and indestructible. Although he had stepped down as the head of the family, he did not regret it at all. He was no longer the person he used to be. Now, although he had lost the Mu group, he felt that he was strong and indestructible. He gently hugged the three of them and narrowed his eyes. Inadvertently, his gentle gaze was like the purest lake water, tender and moving. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The Mu family's house was brightly lit. After Mu Linfeng left the banquet, Mu Shumin and Mu Yanqing left as well. However, the others did not leave. They sat down calmly and discussed the matter of the head of the family. Ever since Mu Yaja casually stepped down from his position, these elders and shareholders, who were initially gloating over the company's misfortune, became worried. Never would they have expected Mu Yaja to abdicate his responsibilities without looking back, all for the sake of a woman. This time they were worried sick. Regarding the news of Mu Yaja stepping down as the head of the family, the next step was to launch a series of public relations. First, they had to issue an announcement letter to announce that Mu Yaja had stepped down as the CEO of Dishing Financial Group. Next, they would have to face the bombardment of the media. The public relations department would probably have to quickly set up an alert and do a good job of public relations. Then, when the news was released, they would have to think of ways to calm the unrest and uneasiness caused by the change of power in the headquarters. After all, any change in power in a company would usually be announced in advance to give a precaution. For example, before Mu Yaja became the CEO, Mu Yaja's CEO, the headquarters of Mu Group issued an announcement 1 month in advance. Moreover, within this 1 month, all the handover work was carried out in an orderly manner. 1 month later, Mu Yaja took office. Even so, the Mu Group was still in an uproar. Firstly, Mu Yaja was only about 20 years old at that time. He was young and full of vigor. At that age, many men had yet to graduate from university, but he had already obtained a degree in finance. Moreover, with his overwhelming strength, he stood his ground against all opposition and ascended to the position of president. There were many people who were not convinced by him. Not to mention the veterans of Dishing shareholders meeting, even the ordinary employees at the headquarters shook their heads at the mention of this new president. Before Mu Yaja took over, Mu Sheng was the chairman and honorary CEO, while the deputy general manager was an external executive. However, all the power was still in his hands. With such a young face changing overnight, many people's hearts were pounding. They were afraid that the Mu Group would go downhill after the change. A generation's head, a generation's head. Chapter 21-21. Secondly, as the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. As soon as Mu Yaja took over, he set fire to the senior management. He kicked out a few good-for-nothings and cleaned up a few of the senior management who were idling around. He then supported new people to take over. That move caused panic among many people. During that period of time, the stock price of Mu Group was fluctuating. It fell again and again until it plunged by 4%. Don't underestimate that 4%. If it were any other company, they would have been on the verge of bankruptcy. Only a deep-rooted financial group like the Mu Group could barely stabilize the situation. However, just when everyone was worried about the future of Mu Group, Mu Yaja was invincible. Not only did he get rid of the hidden tumors in Mu Group, but he also issued new policies one after another. He carried out reforms swiftly and decisively. He bought up many potential bad assets. Under his operation, Mu Group quickly recovered and climbed to the top with an amazing momentum. How could people not be impressed by such a strategy? Everything felt like a dream. He was a peerless genius. Mu Yaja's business talent was definitely unique. However, now that they were back to this difficult time, the elders were worried. They did not even know how to explain it to the public. They did not even have to think about it. If they announced to the public that Mu Yaja was stepping down as the CEO, the stock price would definitely fall to the bottom. That would cause an immeasurable turmoil within the financial group. At the same time, who else could be the savior of Mu Group like Mu Yaja did in the past? In the entire Mu Group, they could not find another man with such talent and responsibility. As the saying went, the emperor would summon his ministers. However, all of this happened too suddenly. What they were more worried about was the fact that Muyaja had spouted such harsh words today. Given his means, there was no telling what kind of crazy things he would do after leaving the Mu family. He had been in Mu Group for so long. He knew every move of Mu Group like the back of his hand. In other words, it was not impossible for them to empty out Mu Group without anyone knowing. No one knew the operations of the consortium better than Muyaja. Moreover, Muyaja had nurtured a group of thousands of people in the Mu Group. Most of them were the cream of the crop from famous universities such as the United States and the United Kingdom. Once Muyaja left, this group of people would definitely leave with him. This was undoubtedly the loss of the Mu Group's left and right arms. They were loyal to him. Muyaja was right. Without him, the Mu family would truly be in ruins. They would have nothing left. They didn't even dare to imagine what kind of dark day the stock market would experience if Mu Group made an announcement the next day. It wasn't hard to imagine that hundreds of billions of dollars would evaporate. This is too sudden. What do you all think? What opinion can I have? I thought tonight was just a simple family meeting. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. What bad luck. Chapter 21-22. Yaja, that rascal. So many people are scrambling for the position of the family head, and he just threw it away like that. How carefree and unrestrained. Could it be that he really prefers the beauty over the power? Wealth, power, and wealth, he gave them up just like that. Doesn't he have any reluctance? Everyone sighed and shook their heads. One of them said helplessly, "There's no point in saying more now that things have come to this. We'll hold a shareholders' meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow to discuss the next steps. Shifeng will follow up on everything." Understood, fifth uncle. The public relations department must be on high alert. We'll hire a senior public relations consultant to be in charge of all media matters. Yes, I'll make the arrangements right away. Also, the media and legal departments must be on high alert. We'll strictly curb the rumors online. If necessary, we'll use legal means. Yes, sir. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen returned home. While Yun Shishir was busy, Xiao Yichen pulled Yu Yu aside and asked seriously, "Don't you intend to come clean with Mommy? Haven't I already explained it to her?" Yu Yu, on the other hand, was baffled. Xiao Yichen sighed. What about the Hurricane Group? About you and the Hurricane Group, the toys you designed for the Davai project and your involvement in the military and maritime matters? Don't you intend to come clean with Mommy? Yu Yu's expression suddenly turned solemn. He shook his head and said helplessly, "I don't have the courage to do that." Are you worried that Mommy will blame you? Yu Yu smiled weakly, looking a little tired. No. I'm worried that she'll be disappointed in me and think that I'm a bad kid who commits all kinds of evil. Xiao Yichen retorted in his heart. Think? Isn't that the truth? Yu was stunned. Then, his eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Mu Yichen, is he deliberately sabotaging me? Xiao Yichen sighed as well. I also think that it's better for you to hide this from Mommy for now. After all, she might not believe you if you tell her about it, and she'll worry about you. Unlike his usual white-eyed self, Xiao Yichen was surprisingly calm right now. He was thoughtful and considerate. He had considered all the things that Yu Yu was worried about. Even Yu Yu was taken aback by his brother's behavior. You? Me? Are you Mu Yichen? Feeling suspicious, Yu Yu tore at the man's face. Tell me, who are you? I don't believe that you're that idiot. Ah! Mu Yichen grabbed his hand with a mournful look and said aggrievedly, I'm clearly analyzing the matter with you. Don't mess around. At this moment, Mu Yichen finally showed his responsibility and boldness as an older brother. Yu Yu snickered and said, You're finally acting like an older brother. Mu Yichen blushed and cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm your older brother. I couldn't tell. You're usually a punching bag. Mu Yichen rolled his eyes internally. Isn't that because you're always bullying me? I'm just giving in to you a little. Yu Yu suddenly stopped smiling and said calmly, Don't worry. I'll explain it to her when the time is right. It's just that I haven't thought of how to explain it to her yet. Shipping, smuggling, military munitions, war. Chapter 21-23. Just imagining Mommy's expression. They all felt crazy. After receiving the news, Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen quickly rushed to Xiangdi Walk. In the living room, Yun Shishir served tea and heard Lu Jinyu's shocked voice. Boss, are you determined to do this? Jiang Shen also said in disbelief, We're halfway through the plan. Now that boss has stepped down as the CEO, it may be a big challenge for the expansion of the Xinyu Corporation. Boss, you're crazy. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them heard footsteps. They turned their heads and saw Yun Shishir holding the brewed tea, standing there in a daze looking very uneasy. They looked at each other and immediately felt extremely guilty. They comforted her and said, "Sister-in-law, don't think too much. We don't mean what you think. It's okay." Yun Shirshir put the teacup on the table thoughtfully and was about to leave. Mu Yaja suddenly held her hand. She turned around blankly, only to see him smiling deeply and comforting her gently. "Don't think too much, okay?" "Okay." Yun Shirshir shook her head. "Don't worry. You guys continue to talk. I'll go to the garden to trim the flowers." With that, she hurried to the back garden. Mu Yaja's smile disappeared. He turned around and glanced at them coldly with a dangerous gaze. Jiang Xin knew that he had said something wrong and bit his lip guiltily. "What happened tonight was very sudden. I didn't have time to worry about it. The Mu Corporation can't tolerate me anymore. Or, some people with ulterior motives have long wanted to pull me down from this position. They haven't made a move on me because I'm still useful. Tonight, they arranged such a hangmen banquet for me because some people with ulterior motives want to use a few seniors and shareholders to kick me out. As for the others, they just want to suppress my momentum. However, I've turned the tables on them and stepped down as the head of the family. They must be caught off guard and confused." Lu Jinyu immediately understood what Mu Yaja meant. As a matter of fact, Mu Linfeng had long harbored such thoughts. As a chess piece, he was naturally dissatisfied with the fact that the man had his own thoughts and opinions. He wholeheartedly wanted to find a suitable replacement for the patriarch's position. Perhaps he had already secretly cultivated some strength. This old man had a good plan. He wanted to make use of Mu Yaja to strengthen the Mu group. In the end, he would kick Mu Yaja out of the game and support another successor. In that case, wouldn't he be doing all the work for someone else? As for Mu Shumin, her thoughts were much simpler. She just didn't like Mu Yaja and thought that it would be best to kick him out. Even if it was difficult to shake his position, it would be good to use this meeting to dampen his spirit. Mu Yaja could tell that Mu Yanqing had gained Mu Shumin's trust. Mu Shumin wholeheartedly wanted to support this fellow to take the patriarch's position. As for the others, some were purely there to watch the show, while others were dissatisfied with his various actions and wanted to suppress his momentum. However, he had already been defeated and stepped down as the family head in front of everyone. As a result, some people were happy while others were sad. Most of the people who were happy were Mu Yanqing and Mu Shumin. They originally thought that it would be difficult to get rid of this thorn in their flesh, but they did not expect him to take the initiative to step down. Chapter 21-24. The one who was worried was Mu Linfeng. He had yet to find an outstanding successor. Now that he suddenly announced his resignation, he was immediately caught off guard. He had always been the one running the Mu group. Now that he suddenly withdrew, there was no room for any mental preparation. No matter who came halfway, it would definitely be a mess. The more this happened, the more opportunities the Mu group had to take advantage of. He beat them at their own game and took advantage of the situation. It could be said that he was extremely ruthless. There was no way out or defense at all. In this way they would be given many opportunities. Lu Jinyu was suddenly enlightened. When he thought about it, he was secretly amazed by Mu Yaja's shrewdness. Rather than shrewdness, it was better to say that he was scheming. He actually had such a shrewd foresight. But then again, as early as 3 years ago, he had devoted most of his energy to the Xinyu Financial Group. Since then, Big Boss had already been playing a very big game of chess. Poor Mu Yaja. Until now, he was still in the dark and was still delusional about making use of him. Unexpectedly, he had already been reduced to a chess piece in Mu Yaja's hands. Jiang Xin was also quite excited when he heard this. He was waiting for the next step to be bold and decisive. He was ready to take down the Mu group in one go. Mu Yaja held the teacup in his hand and smiled. The ambition and sharpness in his eyes were already indescribable. It was late at night. Yun Shirshir had just made the bed when Mu Yaja pushed the door open and walked in after taking a shower. Hearing her busy voice, he quietly walked over and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. He whispered into her ear, "What are you busy with?" Yun Shirshir was so busy with the things at hand that she did not notice when he walked in at all. She was shocked. When she came back to her senses, she complained, "Make the bed. The weather is cold. The quilt used to be warm." Mu Yaja was not in the mood to listen to what she said. At this moment, he leaned over slightly and gently kissed her earlobe. They had not been intimate for many days, so he kissed her a little hurriedly. However, he was very focused and had no other thoughts. Yun Shirshir laughed and pushed him away, but he was not in the mood to care. Instead, he kissed her deeper and deeper. He twisted her body and hugged her waist. The heat of his palm was transmitted from her waist to her waist. His big hand slowly reached under her clothes and explored. "Hey," Yun Shirshir said coquettishly, "the two little guys haven't slept yet." She had originally promised to go to the two little guys' room and read them a bedtime story after she made the quilt. This was basically her homework before going to bed every night, and she never missed a beat. Muyaja, however, snorted in dissatisfaction. "Ignore them. I don't care. Are you going to coax them to sleep?" Yun Shirshir was amused. She was half joking and half serious. "It's fine as long as you coax me." When his words fell, it was so ambiguous that it made her heart immediately thump thump thump. When she pushed him away just now, she only let out a soft moan. He then unwillingly stuck to her, hugged her and kissed her lips. Their lips were pressed tightly against hers. At an intimate distance, their eyelashes were entwined together. Their breaths were connected and the tips of their noses were touching. The corners of his lips were curved as he kissed her without a second of delay. At first it was just a light touch, but the more they kissed, the more uncontrollable it became. Chapter 21-25. He immediately smiled along with her. No matter when it was, as long as he saw her smile, no matter how tired or unhappy he was, it would all disappear. Under his gentle attacks, she also learned to be obedient and let him kiss her. In the end, she also learned to take the initiative. She wrapped her hands around his shoulders and hooked them around the back of his neck. She took the initiative to kiss his thin lips and gently traced the shape of his lips. Then she deepened her kiss and entwined her breath with his. Her initiative, however, made him feel incomparably comfortable. Under his many training sessions, her kissing skills had finally improved a little. At least, she was no longer as nervous as a zombie when she hugged and kissed him, not moving at all. At that time he was displeased that this little woman was so passionate in all the kissing scenes in the movies, but when it came to him she was like a wooden fish. Now that he thought about it, this was just a little woman's unique shyness. The more she was in front of the person she loved, the more shy she would be. She wouldn't even know where to place her hands. Unlike before, Yun Shirshir was now like a cute puppy. She gently licked the tip of his tongue, pinched it and coquettishly rolled it. Then she dug her way out and bit his lips. She did not use too much strength though. Instead, she was gentle and careful, as if she was licking a delicious patch. He was aroused by her kiss, and his body temperature gradually rose until it was boiling. The man reached out to take off her clothes. She took a shower for him first. She was wearing a bathrobe, and because she had turned on the floor heating, her two cute little feet were bare. As soon as he did this, she was startled. Yun Shirshir blushed and said, "Hey, is it okay that the door isn't locked?" Muyaja laughed and said, "It's okay. What's so important about it? What if the two little rascals come looking for me and the door isn't locked? What if they peek? That's good. It'll be good for them to observe." Yun Shirshir was angry and amused at the same time. "I didn't realize that you were so indecent before. They should know what's going on. Since you haven't been there for so long, they should have guessed what's going on. If they know what's good for them, they wouldn't dare to knock on the door." The more Muyaja spoke, the more husky and magnetic his voice became. He pressed the tip of her nose, and his tall body slowly moved closer to her body. The boiling heat in his eyes could no longer be concealed. He untied her clothes. She moaned a few times and actually cooperated. Her two small hands reached over and began to untie the knot he had tied. With a tug, the knot loosened, and the bathrobe slid down from her shoulders to her waist. She grabbed his collar and gently kissed his collarbone all the way down. Finally, she stopped at his chest and buried her little face in his chest. Over there was his scorching heartbeat. Thump thump thump. It was sonorous and powerful. For some reason, that place was clearly not his sensitive spot, but when she kissed him like this, it actually made his heart feel incomparably soft. A nameless fire immediately rose up, and he really wanted to press her down on the bed, press her under his body and fiercely take her. However, it was rare to see her take the initiative, so he couldn't bear to disturb her mood. He held it in, and allowed her to please him. The pleasure brought about by skin-to-skin contact was so soothing. He closed his eyes, snorted softly, and hugged her shoulders. "Shirshir." Yun Shirshir's movements paused and she looked up at him in a daze. Her eyes were filled with infatuation, and her cheeks were as mesmerizing as if she had put on rouge. Chapter 21-26. That seductive look, from the tip of her eyes to every distinct eyelash, revealed a fatal seduction that could hook one's soul tightly. It caused his heart to stir. The moment he met her gaze, it was as if he had been electrocuted. The electric current instantly struck his waist and traveled along the nerves in his spine to his brain. This was probably the most mysterious charm between a man and a woman. Heaven created men and women at the same time. One was yang, one was yin. One was full of heroic spirit, while the other was charming and enchanting. The two bodies fit together perfectly. Every side of them fit perfectly. It was a pure and natural aesthetic. Her voice was extremely like a lazy cat. With just a mule, it made his heart go numb and unbearable. He suddenly smiled and pecked her lips as if it was some kind of praise. With a good mood, he said a rare sweet sentence. Do you know, right now, you are very charming? Yun Shirshir's heart was alarmed. This man was either usually like an ice block, or when he teased people, it made people's hearts beat like thunder. The two bodies were tightly pressed against each other. Naturally, a kind of fascinating feeling was produced. This kind of feeling was like an intoxicating wine. It was mellow and rich, but it was not strong at all. It made people feel dizzy after taking a sip. Intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves, they still wanted to take more. The man looked at her blushing little face and caught her little hand, slowly guiding her to the next step. After taking off her clothes, it was springtime. The two people were entangled together, sinking into the soft big bed. Muyaja pinched her waist and went deeper, taking her, wanting her. Tonight he seemed to be especially passionate. He threw away the heavy work of the company and the annoying trifles, wholeheartedly sinking into her without any distractions. Without any distracting thoughts, he was completely focused and immersed in the intoxicating asterisk. Naturally, it was rare for him to be in such a good mood. He was not like before when he attacked the city. Instead, he was extremely gentle and quickly climbed to the clouds of pleasure. They made love with each other until midnight, when they stopped. After they were done, he hugged her and covered her with the blanket. Lowering his head, he saw her satisfied little face dyed red. She was nestled in his chest, her pair of jade legs overbearingly and greedily occupying his waist. She was lazy and did not want to move at all. The aftertaste of the deed lasted for a long time. Even each of his fingers slowly relaxed. This reminded him of a pet cat he had raised when he was young. Her current expression was exactly the same as that cat's. When he was young, on his birthday, his mother had given him an American short-hair cat. It was very clingy. Once he sat down, it would walk arrogantly and elegantly to his side, rubbing against him intimately. Then it would jump and nestle in his arms. When his interest was piqued and he gently stroked it, this little kitten actually spread out its body and turned its belly towards him, allowing him to stroke it. Perhaps it felt satisfied. Its two little paws were constantly stretched out, and its throat made a gulu-gulu sound as if it was enjoying it, as if it was intimate, and it kept snuggling its little head into his embrace. At that time he was very fond of this cat. After all, it was given to him by his mother, and he had always loved it dearly. That cat had once lived in the softest part of his heart. Chapter 21-27. However, one day when he returned home, he didn't know which mischievous child in his family had played a prank on him. When he opened the door to his room, he saw the cat cruelly nailed to the windowsill. A very thick metal rod had pierced through its throat. At that time he was stubborn and proud. Even though he was heartbroken, he didn't shed a single tear. He knew that this must be a prank by some child. Because of jealousy and hatred, the child had nowhere to vent, so he tortured his most beloved pet to death. He didn't cry and buried the cat quietly. It was probably from then on that he swore that he would become the strongest man and never let anyone bully him. Muyaja snapped out of his thoughts and hugged Yun Shirshir even tighter. Yun Shirshir was almost out of breath from his actions. She looked up and saw that his expression was a little strange. She asked uneasily, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Muyaja said plainly. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Suddenly she frowned and said weakly, "You're always like this. You won't tell me what's on your mind when I ask." Muyaja's expression froze. Then he slowly curved his lips and explained, "You remind me of a pet I had when I was young." "Pet?" Yun Shirshir couldn't help but be surprised. "You had a pet?" I didn't expect. I thought you didn't have much love for small animals." Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. "Am I that cold?" "You are. At least it seems like you are." Yun Shirshir gave a very pertinent comment. She smiled and asked, "What kind of pet do you have? A dog?" "A snake." Yun Shirshir's mouth formed an O shape. Snake? Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't surprising. Snakes were cold-blooded animals. Just like the initial impression he gave people, he was cold and heartless. Muyaja immediately said, "I'm just scaring you. Compared to dogs, I prefer cats. They're quiet, obedient, and clingy. More importantly, they won't disturb me when I'm in a bad mood. Instead, they'll quietly accompany me." It wasn't that he hadn't raised a puppy before. At first he liked it very much. But when he was young he was too thoughtful and always liked to isolate himself in a small space. As for the dog, it seemed to be so enthusiastic that it was a little over the top. It ran around as if it had endless energy all over its body, jumping and jumping, full of vitality. He simply did not have the mental strength to deal with such enthusiasm. Therefore he was more inclined towards cats. You raised a cat? Yes, my mother gave it to me as a birthday present. I still remember its round head. It was very cute. Muyaja paused and added, I like it very much. What about now? Where's the cat? Yun Shirshir was a little curious. She had never seen him raise any pets. Dead? Yun Shirshir frowned and her heart sank. Is it sick? You might not know this, but in a family like the Mu family, even children of a few years old will be influenced by the family's scheming. Therefore there will be wars. Muyaja narrowed his eyes and curled his lips. That cat was probably tortured to death by one of the children. Because of his identity as the legitimate son, he had many enemies. Many children saw him as a thorn in their side and a stumbling block. As for him, he didn't have any close peers. Chapter 21-28. Yun Shirshir was terrified when she thought about it. Then she was filled with righteous indignation. They're so young but they're already so vicious. How could they abuse animals? It's horrible. The kitten is innocent. How could they be so cruel? Are their hearts made of iron? It's my fault. Muyaja clenched his fists. His eyes were cold. In this world, the weak are prey to the strong. The weak are meat and the strong are food. If you're not strong enough, you're destined to be eaten alive. He lowered his gaze and stroked her head. He smiled gently. But I'll protect you. He would protect her, Yu and Xiaoyichen. He was never a man who loved power and fame. But all this, be it power or fame, was just to build a majestic city for his beloved princess. He was duty-bound to protect her. That was all. Compared to being a prince, he was more willing to be her knight. He would go through fire and water with no regrets. Yun Shirshir hugged him tightly and smiled contentedly. Early the next morning, Mu Group was busy preparing for the event. The Public Relations Department boldly and decisively prepared a public relations draft to deal with the media, while the Legal Department and the Media Department worked together. Early in the morning, they held 7 to 8 emergency meetings of various sizes. As for the other members, they were also in a state of confusion during the regular meetings. The news of Muyaja stepping down as the head of the family was not released for the time being. It was strictly forbidden to leak any news. The Mu Group was not ready to face the storm yet. Therefore, the news of Muyaja stepping down as the head of the family was still kept confidential. However, because Muyaja was absent from the regular meeting in the morning, the entire company was in chaos. The elders and family members who had experienced what happened last night were very tight-lipped. Therefore, no one knew why Muyaja did not appear in the company. Mingyu, on the other hand, received the news from Muyaja. Other than being surprised, he was more solemn. Muyaja's departure from the Mu Group had become permanent. There was no turning back. However, Muyaja did not appear in the company. Instead, another uninvited guest suddenly broke into the headquarters building. Mu Yanqing tossed and turned all night, unable to fall asleep. He was nervous and uneasy. He was nervous and uneasy because Mu Linfeng did not announce the matter of the family head on the spot last night. Not only did everyone panic, but he also fell into a state of panic. He was afraid that a long delay might lead to trouble. He could tell that he wasn't the most powerful candidate in Muyaja's mind. Mu Linfeng seemed to be very dissatisfied with him, so he didn't announce it on the spot because he couldn't accept Muyaja's resignation. Secondly, Mu Yanqing didn't have that kind of responsibility and ability. However, a call from Mu Shumin woke him up in the middle of the night. She said, "Yanqing, don't worry. I'll do my best to help you become the head of the family." These words, however, made Mu Yanqing's state of mind turn from danger to peace, and he fell into extreme excitement. Therefore, he didn't sleep for the whole night. Early in the morning, he drove to the Mu Group headquarters. He thought to himself that with Mu Shumin's strong support and Mu Linfeng's promise to him previously, he was definitely going to be the head of the household. Therefore, Mu Yanqing rushed over early in the morning, relying on his identity as the future CEO, to inspect the company's affairs. He took it as an opportunity to get used to his identity as the CEO, in advance. Chapter 21-29. He was thinking that it was only a matter of time before he became the head of the family. Mu Yanqing went to the CEO's office in high spirits. He pushed the door open and was greeted by a cold and quiet room. The high-end decor, expensive office furniture, the genuine leather sofa that symbolized power and supremacy, and the expensive Anknun carpet under his feet. He looked at all of this ambitiously, and his heart was filled with longing and ambition. It was said that when Muyaja took office, the furnishings in the office were too old. Moreover, because of the long history, the original wooden furniture was somewhat damaged. Therefore, he specially ordered people to renovate the office. The office appliances were all brand new and made of the highest quality materials. Such an elegant and honorable office in the future would belong to him. Mu Yanqing paced back and forth in the office. Rather than saying that he was visiting, it was better to say that he was adapting to his future work environment in advance. He sat on the genuine leather sofa for a while and fiddled with the tea set in boredom. Finally, he leisurely brewed a cup of Da Hong Pao tea and took a big sip. Fragrant. It was really not an ordinary fragrance. This was the most authentic Da Hong Pao tea. If it were in the past, he would probably only think about it. After all, big red packets were rare in the market. Those that could be bought were mostly artificially cultivated and could not be considered authentic Da Hong Pao tea. The purest Da Hong Pao tea grew on the cliffs of Wui Mountain. It was impossible for humans to go up to pick it. Every year, specially trained monkeys went up to pick it. The annual yield was at most 40 caddies. The 40 caddies of tea were all for auction and could not be bought in the market. On the day of Hong Kong's return, a big red packet was given as a precious gift to the governor. 1 gram of tea was worth 10,000 taels of gold. This was probably the most expensive tea in the world. The Mu Group won 2 caddies of tea at the auction, which was more than 20 million. These tea leaves were used to entertain high-ranking VIPs. Mu Yanqing, on the other hand, enjoyed it for himself. Beautiful, beautiful. Mu Yanqing could not help but mutter in his heart, Muyaja really doesn't know how lucky he is. He has such a wonderful thing to enjoy, but he doesn't care about it. He finished a cup of tea and stood up again. Finally, he walked to the front of the desk. He looked up and glanced at the empty chair. However, this was the Mu Group's dragon throne, which symbolized the highest authority. A greedy and excited smile appeared on Mu Yanqing's face. Then, with a greedy heart, he strode over and plopped himself down on the chair. The moment he sat down, his brows relaxed and he revealed a satisfied expression. Whether it was satisfaction, comfort, or pride, it was all expressed without words. This was a moment that he had yearned for a long time. Even though this moment couldn't be said to be very formal, just having fun like this made him feel incomparably comfortable. Sitting in this luxurious office, the passion in his heart could no longer be concealed. His burning gaze fell on the high-quality mahogany desk and he subconsciously reached out his hand. At that moment he was so excited that his fingertips could not help but tremble. Mu Yanqing took a few deep breaths and finally calmed down the excitement in his heart. He touched the smooth surface of the desk. In fact, he had been longing for the desk, sofa, and every object in this office, even a small seal, for a long time. Chapter 2130. Mu Yanqing suddenly cleared his throat and adjusted his clothes. Then he slowly leaned against the back of the chair. While he felt comfortable, his face revealed a proud and arrogant expression. Second brother, you finally have a day like this. Losing the top position in the Mu Group must not be a good feeling, right? Ah. At that moment, he was like an ambitious prince who had snuck into the imperial palace and sat on the throne. That sense of superiority almost spontaneously arose from within him. Then he imitated Muyaja's usual demeanor and pretended to be arrogant. He threw the stack of financial reports on the floor and immersed himself in the role of a CEO. He shouted angrily at the air, "Are you trying to fool me with these? Get out." As soon as he finished speaking, he excitedly laughed at the top of his lungs. Haha. Damn it, this is so satisfying. Mu Yanqing suddenly stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that had been wiped clean. He looked at the city streets expressionlessly. Standing on the highest floor of the Mu Group headquarters, he only needed to lower his head slightly to have a panoramic view of the entire city. From his angle, the traffic and the employees who walked into the building were like ants. It was as if they would die without a burial ground if they were crushed lightly. Freedom. That was his state of mind at that moment. In his heart, the impression that Muyaja gave others was that he was awe-inspiring and unapproachable. That was the feeling he wanted. He really wanted to sit in this position as soon as possible and let those who usually looked down on him have their eyes opened. So what if he was a concubine's son? In the end, didn't he still get rid of the son of the first wife and sit on the throne? Mu Yanqing touched the surface of the table. His eyes were burning with passion. At the same time, He felt that the turbid air that had been suppressed in his chest for a long time was finally released with these two hearty laughs. This was probably the glory of being in a position of power. This was the charm of power and wealth. No one could stop it. Standing at the pinnacle of power, receiving the admiration and groveling of countless people, such a feeling was infatuated and yearned for. Only a man as aloof as Muyaja would be unmoved by her charm. However, he was already a thing of the past. As for him, he was from the future. Mu Yanqing's face split into a wide grin. However, if this grin were to fall into the eyes of others, it would appear especially sinister and terrifying. Suddenly, there was the sound of the door opening behind him. Vigilant, he turned around and saw Minyu walking in. He recognized him. He was Muyaja's personal assistant and could be considered his most important confidant. When Minyu saw him, he was stunned for a moment before he asked suspiciously, "Young Master Yanqing, why are you here?" Without waiting for Mu Yanqing to answer, he immediately showed a hostile attitude. "This is the CEO's office. Without the CEO's permission, you are not allowed to set foot in here." Minyu was like a loyal subject, trying his best to protect his master's territory with a firm attitude. "I'm not allowed to set foot in here?" Mu Yanqing laughed out loud as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Why can't I come in?" Chapter 21:31. However, it seemed that he could not emulate Muyaja's boldness. In his opinion, he was just like a child who insisted on wearing an adult's suit. It was childish and ridiculous. A child's behavior could be considered as childlike. His behavior, on the other hand, was disgusting. "This is Chairman Mu's seat. You can't sit here." "Why should I?" Mu Yanqing smiled and asked in a deep voice, "Why can't I sit here?" Hearing this, Minyu's brows furrowed. Because I'm not the chairman, so I don't have the right to sit here?" Mu Yanqing's lips curled into a mocking smile. His posture relaxed as he slowly said, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you though. From now on this will be my exclusive seat. Just based on this, you have no right to interfere with me, do you understand?" Minyu sneered. What was this? Was this a show of strength? He was well aware of Muyaja's resignation as the head of the family. He also knew that, in the future, this place would become a vanity fair for others. However, he did not have the right to do so now. The official announcement of Chairman Mu's resignation had not been made yet, had it? At least for now, this office still belonged to Chairman Mu. Minyu had been loyal to Muyaja all these years. Hence, when he saw another man shamelessly occupying this office, he quickly became hostile. Even though he knew that the man before him had a much higher status than him, he was not afraid at all. Mu Yanqing, on the other hand, had completely immersed himself in this role. He displayed the attitude of an emperor as he looked down at Minyu condescendingly. Obviously, he did not think much of a small character like him. Seeing that Minyu did not speak as if he was holding back something, Mu Yanqing observed him for a while and then curled the corners of his lips. He remembered this fellow's name, Minyu. He was said to be a very capable person. He was also Muyaja's personal assistant who had been by his side for the longest time. Muyaja placed a lot of emphasis on ability. Being able to stay by his side for so long, it was obvious to all that she was quite capable. Originally, he was thinking that when he ascended the throne, he would do what Muyaja did when Muyaja first took office. He would directly wipe out the remaining forces around Muyaja. However, if he were to get rid of these people as soon as he took office, he would appear to be narrow-minded. If he were to replace Muyaja's people as soon as he took office, he would appear to be heartless and cold. This would leave a bad impression on the company. Therefore, he decided to keep these people by his side for the time being and observe their performance. If they were outstanding enough and had potential, he would promote them for the time being. If they were not loyal enough, he would slowly find fault with them and then find an excuse to say that they were incompetent. This way he would have a convincing reason to kick them out. Mu Yanqing was quite astute in this regard. With that thought in mind, Mu Yanqing threw an olive branch at Minyu. "Your name is Minyu, right?" "Yes." Minyu's attitude was neither cold nor warm, which made Mu Yanqing feel particularly uncomfortable. This fellow is really refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. I'm about to be promoted. At this time he should hurry up and suck up to me. If he makes me feel better, I won't make things difficult for him. Chapter 21:32. Speaking of which, it was true that the servant was like the master. Muyaja wore an arrogant face all day long. His subordinates were cold and did not seem to know how to read people's expressions. However, he still held it in and said with a fake smile, "I see that you've stayed by second brother's side for so many years, so you should have some decent skills. If a talent like you works for me, you'll have a bright future ahead of you." Why don't you stay by my side after second brother retires as the CEO? If you perform well, I'll promote you. As long as you're loyal to me and work hard, I won't mistreat you. As for your salary, I'll double the amount second brother offered you. How about that? Mu Yanqing was best at winning over people's hearts. Mu Shumin was a classic example. After a few bowls of bewitching potion, he was inclined to his position. Mu Yanqing was full of confidence. Now that he had offered such generous conditions, no one would not be tempted. However, his tone was somewhat reserved, as if his acknowledgement was a great favor. It was as if he was sizing up a beggar. It was gentle, but it felt like he was giving alms, which made one uncomfortable. Mu Yanqing seemed to be certain that Minyu would wholeheartedly rely on him. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. His original master was in dire straits, so why didn't he choose a better career path? He was waiting for Minyu to show his subservient and fawningly express his sincerity to him. However, Minyu only smiled as if he did not care about the conditions he offered. He only said indifferently, "Young Master Yanqing, don't you think it's too early to say this? I don't think there's any agenda for you to take the position." Mu Yanqing immediately said, "Ha! What do you know? Now that second brother has retired, I'm the best candidate. If I dare to say such things to you, I naturally have the confidence to do so. Don't worry, your master is in dire straits now. There's no room for him to make a comeback. There's no need to think about betraying him. He's the one who abandoned you, so you don't have to feel guilty." After a pause, he opened his mouth and revealed his ambition. "What do you think?" "Nothing much." Minyu smiled graciously, elegantly, and politely. Compared to Mu Yanqing's sinister smile, it was a world of difference. "Wherever President Mu goes, I'll follow. In this life, I'll only acknowledge him as my boss. As for what you said, I'm sorry, but I can't." "You?" Mu Yanqing stared at him in surprise before bursting into laughter all of a sudden. "Minyu, don't be silly. Second brother, from today onward, he's no longer the Mu's. From today onward, he's fallen from the top. He's to Mu to make a comeback in his life. To Mu, have? To say, to work to be to, are. Mu. To, are." The smile on Minyu's face did not waver at all. "The day President Mu officially retires is also the day I leave my post. Regardless of whether it's a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, I'll walk down this path with him." Chapter 2133. Mu Yanqing sprung up from his seat. "Stop right there." Minyu's back view froze on the spot. Mu Yanqing was a little angry. How could this fellow be so ungrateful? He had intended to keep him around to give him face, but now, not only did he refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, he even dared to put on airs with him. He was not going to fall for this trick. If it were in the past, he would have kicked him away long ago. Now, however, he did not want to do so anymore. It was as if his desire to conquer had been aroused. Since this fellow insisted on not submitting to him, he wanted to tame him and make him obedient to be used by him. A man's desire to conquer was not only reflected on women. Thus, he took a few steps towards him and shouted out a price, 200,000. Minyu slowly turned around and looked at him coldly. He was expressionless, as if he were looking at an idiot. Mu Yanqing raised two fingers in a lofty manner, looking as arrogant as a savior. 200,000 yuan. I'll give you an annual salary of 200,000 yuan. You'll follow me. If you do well, I'll promote you first. You'll have a meteoric rise. You must know that I'm giving you this salary because I think highly of you. Other people may not get such treatment." Minyu sneered inwardly, but he did not show it on his face. Soon, however, a look of contempt appeared on his face. This expression undoubtedly infuriated Mu Yanqing. He resisted the urge to curse him and then pretended to be straightforward as he raised his offer. 300,000 yuan. 300,000 yuan, this was not a small temptation. Minyu could not be bothered with him and turned to leave. Mu Yanqing was anxious. Seeing that the other did not give him face, he cursed, "What a greedy dog. You're just like your master. 400,000 yuan is fine as long as you're loyal to me." Minyu stopped in his tracks with his back facing him. As if he had heard the funniest joke, he suddenly laughed out loud. Mu Yanqing was confused and reprimanded impatiently, "What are you laughing at? 400,000? Minyu turned around and sneered. "Young Master Yanqing, I see that you don't usually ask about the company's affairs, so you probably don't know, right? Chairman Mu gave me an annual salary of 1 million. Moreover, all the employees working in the headquarters, even if they were just a small secretary, were 1 in a million. Their salary would be at least 300,000 yuan. And as a member of the 1,000-person think tank as a special assistant, my annual salary is at least $1 million. Not including bonuses and additional subsidies, the $400,000 you gave me, even if I was a little better, my monthly salary would be more than that. Moreover, if I want to be your assistant, even if you give me 10 million or 100 million, I might not be willing. Ah. He was followed by endless mockery and ridicule. Mu Yanqing's face darkened. He felt extremely humiliated. He was completely overwhelmed. 1 million. A special assistant's annual salary was as high as 1 million yuan? Second brother is really bold. Just as he was exclaiming in amazement, Minyu said coldly, "Young Master Yanqing, let me give you a piece of advice. With your little foresight, you'd better not make a fool of yourself here. Forgive me for being blunt, but so what if you become the Mu Group's chief executive? The Mu Group will only go downhill in your hands. Working for you will only lead to a bleak future." Mu Yanqing felt suffocated and could not swallow his anger. Chapter 2134. Mu Yanqing felt that he could not swallow his anger, so he retorted indignantly, "What you said is ridiculous. How can I not do what my second brother can do well? Just wait and see. I'll do better than him. I'll be even more outstanding." Minyu replied indifferently, "Oh? Let's wait and see then." When the time came, if the Mu Group encountered any crisis, it would not be like a stray dog running to President Mu and begging for mercy. However, there's a condition. Wait until you officially take over the position. Although it's very likely that you'll be the head of the family, it doesn't mean that you'll be the CEO. If you have extra time, why don't you think about how to broaden your horizons? These words were undoubtedly a great humiliation to Mu Yanqing. Men were all hot-tempered. Moreover, at Mu Yanqing's age he was at the prime of his life. Moreover, with his status and identity, how could he allow a small character to humiliate and belittle him again and again? Upon hearing this, Mu Yanqing could not force himself to calm down. Instead, he dashed forward, grabbed Minyu's shoulders and angrily grabbed him by the collar. Raising his fist high, he looked as if he was going to punch the latter in the face. However, Minyu was not afraid of his threat. Instead, his eyes widened. His fist was like the wind, but it stopped abruptly when it was less than a centimeter away from his eyes. Mu Yanqing was amazed by Minyu's extraordinary courage. Seeing that his fist was about to land on him, he did not dodge and even glared at him with his eyes wide open. This made him even angrier. His chest heaved up and down, unable to quell his anger, but looking at Minyu's resolute and disdainful eyes, it was as if he did not take him seriously at all. Mu Yanqing was enraged and roared at him like a madman. I'm warning you, don't look at me like that. Who do you think you are to act so rashly in front of me? I'm warning you. Once second brother's resignation is announced, I'll be taking over immediately. Do you know what this means? It means that I'll be in charge of this huge conglomerate from now on. Even though I haven't ascended yet, a lowly thing like you has no right to question me. Do you understand? Minyu snorted coldly. Clearly he didn't take him seriously at all. Just as Mu Yanqing was about to teach the arrogant brat a lesson, Mu Linfeng's furious voice was heard from the door. "Yanqing, what are you doing?" Mu Yanqing raised his head and saw Mu Linfeng, who happened to pass by the door, frowning in displeasure at this scene. Earlier, when Minyu came in, he did not close the door tightly. When Mu Linfeng rushed to the meeting room, he passed by the office and saw the door ajar. He thought that Mu Yaja had returned to the company. As soon as he opened the door, he was disappointed to see this scene. So it's this kid? What was he doing here? He happily thought that Mu Yaja had thought it through and regretted it, so he returned to the company. However, when he opened the door and saw that it was him, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. When Mu Yanqing saw him, he immediately retracted his hand and stood to one side with a guilty conscience. The anger on his face faded instantly as he smiled at him. Second uncle. Minyu also smiled politely at Mu Linfeng. His attitude was rather respectful. Chairman Mu. Chapter 2135. Minyu nodded and walked away immediately. Just as Mu Yanqing was feeling uneasy, Mu Linfeng slowly walked in and scanned the office. Finally, his stern gaze landed on him. "Why are you here?" Mu Yanqing was at a loss for words. He hemmed and hawed, not knowing how to explain himself, but how could Mu Linfeng not tell that he was ambitious? Mu Linfeng silently scrutinized him for a long time, only to see him squirming and not knowing how to explain himself. He swept a glance across the office and saw the Dahong Pao tea that Mu Yanqing had just made. There were obvious signs of him sitting on the office chair and some of the reference books on the bookshelf being messily flipped through. It seemed that this lad had been here for a long time. He knew very well that Muyaja had always been a clean freak. Other than that, no one was usually allowed to enter this office. Other than dusting and cleaning, everything in the office was basically arranged by him. The reference books were neat and tidy, and when he was not around, the desk and chairs would be arranged neatly. He was puzzled for a moment before he instantly understood. After all, Mu Linfeng had been in power for a long time and had experienced the ways of the world. He had also come into contact with all kinds of people. Although he did not say that he had seen countless people, how could he not guess what was going on in Mu Yanqing's mind when he had watched him grow up? Whatever he was thinking in his heart, he could basically see through it with a single glance. At this moment, Muyaja had just stepped down from his position, yet this lad had rushed into the CEO's office in a hurry. Mu Yanqing was not complicated at all. Compared to Muyaja, he was much easier to deal with. He did not need to speculate too much to know what was going on in the latter's mind. His ambition could be said to be very clear. Did this fellow think that after Muyaja stepped down from his position, the CEO position of the Mu Group would naturally belong to him? Mu Linfeng did not bat an eyelid. He glared at him sternly and reprimanded him sternly. Yanqing, your second brother just stepped down from his position as the family head and CEO yesterday, yet you rushed into the CEO's office in such a hurry. With so many pairs of eyes watching, it's inevitable that people will gossip. I think you'd better restrain yourself a little. Otherwise, if word gets out, the people below will think that you forced your elder brother to abdicate. It won't be good for you in the future. Mu Yanqing froze on the spot when he heard his uncle's words. His eyes widened in surprise as he stared at his uncle, feeling that there was more to his words than met the eye. Was second uncle worried that his actions would have a negative impact on the company? What did this mean? This meant that second uncle had the intention to help him ascend the throne. Otherwise, what was there to worry about? It was obvious that he valued his status. That was why he had such thoughts and gave him a few pointers. Mu Yanqing, who did not know how to restrain himself, broke into a wide grin. Chapter 2136. Mu Yanqing's smile froze on his face. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he stood there in a daze. He regained his senses at once and asked in a fluster, "Second uncle, what do you mean by that?" "The literal meaning. You're very smart, so you should be able to understand it." Mu Linfeng did not elaborate further, but his meaning was already expressed in his words. Mu Yanqing felt that his joy had turned into sorrow. His originally extremely excited mood was like a bucket of ice water pouring over his head, extinguishing his enthusiasm. His expression instantly became dispirited. He sighed and then excused himself. "Second uncle, your words are a little too hurtful. I admit that I'm indeed inferior to second brother in many aspects. I'm very clear about this in my heart. However, no one is outstanding at the beginning. Back then, when second brother was promoted, the entire Mu family was against it. It was you who stood your ground against everyone's opinions and supported second brother. Reality has proven that second brother did a good job in the end. This is undeniable. Perhaps I'm not as capable as second brother, but that's secondary. My loyalty to second uncle is something second brother can't compare to. Second uncle, your words are too hurtful." Mu Linfeng's expression did not change much when he heard this. He only nodded and said, "Indeed, you're much more enthusiastic about us than that child Yaja. I also believe in your loyalty to me, but it's not enough to rule a financial group. Capability comes first. Moreover, second uncle is already old and can't help you much. Let's not talk about other things, just the company's connections are something that you rarely take care of. There's a lot of work to be done in the financial group. I'm worried that you won't be able to adapt in a short time. Your second brother did this very well and no one can replace him. However, now that your second brother is gone, the company is in a mess. You're not familiar with the company's affairs at all. If you take over, you'll definitely be flustered and full of loopholes. That's what I'm worried about." Now that the financial group had lost its core leader, it was as if it had lost its emperor's rule. The board of directors was already in a mess. There was a saying that a country couldn't be without a ruler for a day. This was indeed the case. Mu Yanqing's face took a turn for the worse and turned ashen in an instant. His originally arrogant face turned ashen in an instant. Mu Linfeng had lifted him up to the clouds in an instant, and now he had given him a severe blow by reprimanding him. Min Yu's mocking voice still echoed in her ears, sounding extremely sarcastic. He was so angry that his face turned red, but he didn't dare to say anything. Mu Linfeng sized him up. He knew that this nephew of his was not as capable as Yaja. Most importantly, he could not keep his composure. Look, it was only the first day of Yaja's resignation. but he had already rushed into the headquarters excitedly like a crown prince who was about to ascend the throne. His ambitious face really disappointed him. After Muyaja stepped down, who would be able to fill this position? He had been thinking about this problem for a long time. He didn't close his eyes the entire night because he was thinking about this problem. However, no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't find a suitable candidate. Among the many candidates, Mu Yanqing was definitely not the most capable one. Chapter 2137. He had watched Mu Yanqing grow up. Just like Muyaja, he had also brought him up. Although he was not outstanding, he was, at the very least, absolutely loyal to him. As for the rest, he had no interest in them at all. He had learned from his mistakes. Having suffered enough at Muyaja's hands, he did not want to painstakingly nurture a talent only to end up being an ingrate. Mu Yanqing was the most suitable candidate in his heart for the time being, but he could not reveal his thoughts completely. Otherwise, this lad would inevitably become arrogant and complacent after being promoted to such a high position. Everything had to be done step by step. Hence, Mu Linfeng glanced at the disappointed Mu Yanqing at the side and suddenly said slowly, "Yesterday your Aunt Shumin and I talked about you. We talked for a long time on the phone. She approves of you and thinks that you're up to the task." There was not much joy on Mu Yanqing's face though. What was the use of having Mu Shumin's approval? Mu Linfeng had the most power. If Mu Shumin approved of him and Mu Linfeng did not, wouldn't he be happy for nothing in the end? Mu Yanqing only hummed in acknowledgement, appearing somewhat indifferent. However, he heard Mu Linfeng continue. "Although I think that you're not steady enough, lacking in capability, and lacking in maturity in the way you handle problems, I'm still considering such a matter on account of your loyalty." Hearing this, Mu Yanqing's eyes widened in joy as they lit up. "Second uncle you," Mu Linfeng continued. "If you have the time, stay at home and sort out the organization's affairs. I'll send someone to send you the information when the time comes. Go back and get used to the organization's rhythm. Otherwise, if I support you now, you'll only become a joke. If you have the time to come to the company to mess around, you might as well learn how to be an excellent business manager." "Yes, I understand." Mu Yanqing nodded. He hid his ecstasy in his heart and maintained a calm and steady demeanor on the surface. Mu Linfeng continued. "As the successor, you'll naturally have to be inspected by all the shareholders. When the time comes, if you don't even know the company's internal affairs, won't you be a laughingstock and embarrass me?" "Second uncle, are you saying that you approve of Yanqing?" Mu Yanqing was overjoyed. However, Mu Linfeng said, "Whether I approve of you or not is another matter. The key is your own performance." Mu Yanqing nodded, unable to contain his joy. Mu Linfeng replied, "I have a meeting coming up. You can arrange it yourself." "Yes." Mu Yanqing watched him leave. Halfway through, Mu Linfeng suddenly thought of something and turned to look at him. Mu Yanqing, who thought that something was about to happen, suddenly heard him say, "I'm concerned that your foundation in the Mu family isn't stable yet. If I were to support you at this time, you might not be welcomed by others." After thinking for a while, she realized that you're not young anymore. It's time to consider getting married and having children. Therefore, I'm thinking of arranging a marriage for you. I don't know what you're thinking. If it were Muyaja, he would definitely reject her outright at this time. This brat had never obeyed anyone's arrangements. Ever since Yun Shishir appeared, he had become even more unruly. Chapter 2138. Hence, he immediately nodded and said, as expected of second uncle. "You're so considerate of me. I'm honored. May I know which family's young mistress you've found for me? I'd like to be mentally prepared." Mu Linfeng was silent for a moment before he suddenly narrowed his eyes. "Do you know Lin Shuya from the Lin family?" "The Lin family?" Mu Yanqing sucked in a breath of cold air and then nodded fiercely. "The Lins are a prestigious family in the capital. Although they're not on par with the Mews in terms of seniority, their influence in the city is enough to be on par with the Mews. As for this Lin Shuya, I've only heard of her name and haven't met her yet. You'd better take care of yourself before we arrange to meet." "Ha!" Mu Yanqing was stunned. Mu Linfeng laughed. "You can hide it from others, but you can't hide it from second uncle. Don't you have a few girlfriends outside? Before that, you'd better cut all ties with those messy women." Mu Yanqing was stunned. In the blink of an eye, Mu Linfeng had already left in a huff. When he came back to his senses, he broke out in a cold sweat. The Lins. If he could have a marriage alliance with the Lins, it would be a timely help to his ascension to the top. He must seize this opportunity. He sneered at the thought of Muyaja. He was not as foolish as Muyaja, who would not let go of Yun Shishir as if he had never seen a woman before in several lifetimes. What kind of woman did he not have in this world? Women, power, wealth. What did he not have after getting his hands on them? He was the only one who had abandoned power, family, and wealth to treat a woman like Yun Shirshir like a treasure. It was truly incomprehensible and unbelievable. After all, as long as he became the head of the Mu family, he could do whatever he wanted. He could have whatever he wanted, and he could have any woman he wanted. Although the men of the Mu family had abandoned the traditions of the feudal society, they still had many women by their side. They had 3 wives and 4 concubines, and they never lacked mistresses. Most of them had red flags outside, while colorful flags would flutter outside. Naturally, other than those whose mother clans were excessively powerful, most of them played their own games. Some of the women who married into rich and powerful families had kept several gigolos outside, and their hearts were wild. However, most of the women who married into the Mu family already had status. They only needed to think about what kind of perfume was more stylish, what kind of branded bags were the most suitable for their status, and how to be a proper and elegant rich lady. As for her husband's affairs outside, she mostly turned a blind eye and turned a deaf ear to them. At this thought, he sat back in his chair and dialed a number. After ringing for a long time, a woman's sweet and gentle voice came through. Yanqing? Qingxue, are you free tonight? There is. The woman was overjoyed that he had taken the initiative to call her. She said shyly, I happen to have something to discuss with you. All right, let's talk when we meet. Okay, where should we meet? I'll go to your house at 8 p.m. Okay, I'll wait for you. Chapter 2139. Meng Qingxue was 18 years old this year. She was a model. Her looks were standard and she had a good figure unique to models. Her ample bosom was especially coveted by men, and she had a beauty that most actresses in the entertainment industry did not have. When she was 16 years old, Mu Yanqing met her at a private gathering and took a liking to her at first sight. Even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Men had no resistance to beautiful women. Moreover, Meng Qingxue was a rather outstanding stunner. More importantly, when he first met her, she was still an inexperienced student, so tender that he could pinch water out of her. Mu Yanqing preferred a pure and innocent style, so he took her in without any hesitation. To be precise, she was snatched by Mu Yanqing the moment she debuted. Mu Yanqing was her first man. Meng Qingxue was different from the average young model. She was not that ambitious. Perhaps it was because she was still young and immature. Unlike those overly shrewd young models who had a clear goal, Meng Qingxue still had a simple dream of love. She had always thought that he was just a rich second-generation heir with a good family background and a net worth of tens of millions. Therefore, she wholeheartedly wanted to be with him, get married, and have children with him. Hence, her career as a young model came to an abrupt end. Initially, when she agreed to be Mu Yanqing's woman, other than his series of passionate advances and sweet words, she also liked his handsome appearance and considerate personality. After dating for 3 days, she gave herself to him and became his woman. Of course, other than her, Mu Yanqing had also been with many other women. Some of them were with him before he met Meng Qingxue, and some of them were one-night stands when he was dating Meng Qingxue. Of course, there were also those whom he had a stable relationship with for a few months. However, Meng Qingxue could be considered to be the one he had the longest relationship with. It was mainly because Meng Qingxue had a high EQ and knew how to make him happy. When he was busy, she would not pester him endlessly. The only time she was willful was when Meng Qingxue found out that he had other women. She was so angry that she cried and threw a tantrum, demanding a reasonable explanation. At that time, the two had been together for 3 months. Meng Qingxue developed strong feelings for him, and Mu Yanqing too liked this obedient and lovely woman. Hence, he kept her by his side all this while. However, as a man, once the novelty of a woman wore off, he would not have much patience. When Meng Qingxue quarreled with him because of his unfaithfulness, he was ruthless to her for the first time. Chapter 2140. Meng Qingxue turned pale with fright. It was also at this time that Mu Yanqing revealed his identity to her. It was only then that she realized that the man she had been dating for 2 years was not Xiao Kai. He actually had such a noble background. However, Mu Yanqing's words were undoubtedly heartbreaking. Initially, she loved Mu Yanqing more than she relied on him for material things. However, now that he had said this, her heart was instantly crushed and she fell into a state of despair. It turned out that this man was not with her because he loved her. He said that he liked her. But what was the real reason? At the end of the day, did this man not love her the most? But speaking of which, wasn't this to be expected? Love could be cultivated. Humans were selfish creatures. Anyway, people would love themselves the most, so they would fall in love with someone who could satisfy their desires. From then on, Meng Qingxue kept telling herself to be indifferent to love. While she was still young, she should work hard to get what she wanted. But in the end, she could not let go. It had been 2 years. She was deeply in love with Mu Yanqing and could not bear to part with him. She really loved this man passionately. She clearly saw through his scumbag nature, but she seemed to have been bewitched and hypnotized. Like a moth flying into a flame, she threw herself wholeheartedly into his heart. Mu Yanqing usually had high expectations of her. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness when it came to his women. Therefore, he repeatedly ordered her not to mingle in the modeling industry, not to mingle with other men, not to show her face in public, and not to reveal his identity. In addition, Mu Yanqing did not like to be controlled by others. He warned her not to call him unless it was something important. When he remembered or wanted to see her, he would naturally call her. As for her living expenses, he took care of them single-handedly. He gave her a bank card and told her the password. Every month, if he was in a good mood, her living expenses would be hundreds of thousands. This hundreds of thousands did not include those branded jewelry, bags, lipstick, and perfume. Meng Qingxue deeply felt that after that incident, it seemed that the two of them were in a relationship. No matter how she looked at it, she was like a caged canary, being kept as a mistress. She was deeply disgusted with this feeling. She was different from other materialistic women. She didn't have any wishful thinking about climbing up the social ladder. Compared to being rich, she preferred to marry an ordinary man who loved her wholeheartedly. When she first stepped into the young model circle, it was only because her family was poor. In addition, she had such innate conditions and was blessed by God, so she stepped into the young model circle. In the beginning, she was completely ignorant of the ways of the world, but when she saw all kinds of cruel unspoken rules, she had the intention to retreat. It was then that she met Mu Yanqing. She thought that it was a fated encounter. After they started dating, she basically didn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, in her free time, she still insisted on doing some part-time jobs, eager to support herself. Furthermore, she worked hard to learn how to cook and do household chores. Initially, she only knew the basics, but now she was striving for perfection. She dreamed of being a good wife after marrying Mu Yanqing. That would be her biggest career in life. At that time, Mu Yanqing was still amazed. Chapter 2141. She was not the first woman he had kept as a mistress. When he first stepped into society, he had kept a few innocent girls as his mistress. Not to mention knowing his identity, when those girls saw how generous he was with his money, which one of them did not pester him for branded clothes, bags, diamonds, and other luxury goods? Even when they broke up with him, they would be ambitious and ask for sky-high compensation and breakup fees. This woman, though, was really strange. Despite him transferring hundreds of thousands of yuan to her every month, she was still living in an ordinary apartment building. She was dressed plainly and did not wear any branded clothes or carry an expensive bag. He heard that she had taken 2 separate jobs. Out of curiosity, he checked the bank account he had given her. After deducting the basic expenses such as rent, utilities, food, and clothing, there was almost nothing left for her to spend on her monthly living expenses. This woman. She's so different. On second thought, Mu Yanqing snorted disdainfully. She's probably doing this on purpose to win my favor, right? Suppressing her own desires, pretending to be a girl who didn't love power and wealth, pretending to be a virtuous girl who took care of the family, to please him and desperately want his approval? Is that possible? He was going to marry into a big family in the future. His wife would either be from a prestigious family, a wealthy family, or a scholarly family. There was no way out for him and such an ordinary woman. He was only interested in her beauty, her youth, and her gentleness. Other than that, he couldn't find any other reason to marry her. When he got tired of her, he would leave and give her a sum of money to keep her quiet. That would be the greatest kindness and consideration he could give to this woman. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Mu Yanqing showed up at the entrance of her rented apartment. Fengchen International's apartment building had been around for 8 years. It was not too shabby, but compared to the high-end apartments he had originally found for her, it was definitely quite shabby. As he walked into the elevator, the lights on the ceiling flickered on and off. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. On the 18th floor, Mu Yanqing walked out of the elevator and reached the door. Just as he was about to knock on it, his hand suddenly paused. This time he was prepared to have a showdown with her. No matter the cost, he must cut off all ties with her. She had been with him for 2 years, and it could be said that she had given her best youth to him. In that case, he was not such a heartless person. This time he would also promise her some benefits. These benefits were enough for her to buy a decent apartment in the capital, a luxury car, and the capital to not have to worry about food and clothing for 10 years. He had always been generous towards women. Moreover, it had been 2 years. It wasn't like he didn't have any feelings for her at all. If he wanted to break it off just like that, he would really be a little reluctant. He was not so free and easy that he would be stingy to see her one last time and just walk away. At the thought of this, he gently knocked on the door. Soon he heard footsteps coming from inside, followed by a woman's cautious voice. "Is it Yanqing?" He could hear the playfulness and anticipation in her voice, as well as a bit of vigilance. Chapter 2142. Therefore she was very careful when dealing with strangers. However, when he heard such a gentle and joyful voice, Mu Yanqing's heart suddenly felt empty. Did she not know that he was here to have a showdown with her and break up with her? He hummed in acknowledgement. "Qingxue, it's me. Open the door." The door was quickly opened. As soon as he walked in and the door closed, Meng Qingxue threw herself into his arms, hooked her arms around the back of his neck and kissed him on the lips. The kiss was so passionate and emotional that it infected Mu Yanqing instantly. He hugged her back and responded to her kiss. After the kiss, she snuggled into his arms and said in a slightly choked voice, "Yanqing, I miss you. I miss you so much." Her voice was filled with helplessness and attachment, so much so that Mu Yanqing, who was in a daze for a long time, actually wavered a little. He did not seem to want to break up with her completely. Through the cold phone call, he had originally planned this very well. When he entered and saw her, the first thing he should say was, "Let's break up." Then he would settle the accounts and give her a sizable breakup fee. From then on, they would not owe each other anything. Along the way he was very determined. The words that he had rehearsed more than 10 times were stuck in his throat at this moment. Perhaps it was because, unlike the cold phone call, they had just met. Her soft and warm body was pressed tightly against his chest. He did not even need to exert much effort to feel the warmth of her skin. Such intimate contact instantly evoked his longing for her. Therefore, some words were not so easy to say. He still wanted her. It seemed that he could only become a sentimental man when he was with her. He also couldn't figure out what this woman was capable of. There were several times when he was affectionate with her, and he actually thought that whether they were married or not, he would keep her by his side. Even if he did not have a status, she could always be by his side. However, now was not the time at all. At least, before he got married, he should immediately break up with this woman. Alas, his physical needs gradually overcame his rationality. He kissed her passionately as he stripped her of her clothes. Every part of his body was screaming for her. Meng Qingxue pushed him away shyly and said coquettishly, "Yanqing, don't. I have something to tell you." "What is it? Isn't it better to talk about it in bed?" His ambiguous words made her heart skip a beat. Seeing that they were about to lose their position, Meng Qingxue immediately grabbed his hand. She used so much strength that the veins on the back of her hand almost popped out. He stared at her in surprise and stopped what he was doing. Frowning, he asked, "Why? You don't?" What he wanted was to at least spend some time with her before they broke up. It was the last time they made love. It wouldn't be too late to have a showdown with her after that. However, she seemed to be very resistant, and her face was full of reluctance. That's not like her. If it was in the past, she would be as passionate as fire at this moment. But now he didn't seem to be in high spirits. "What is it?" Mu Yanqing stared at her. "You seem to be very resistant to me today." "It's not that." Meng Qingshue's face grew hotter. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" Chapter 2143. Yanqing. Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip in a dilemma and then said shyly, "I'm pregnant." "I'm pregnant?" Mu Yanqing was stunned. He. Yun sure, I'm pregnant." At the same time, in a cafe in the city center, Song Enya was sitting in front of Yun sure with a smug look on her face. She was as proud as a victor as she announced to her with a smile, "I'm pregnant with Brother Mu's child." Yun sure looked at her expressionlessly. Song Enya's cruel words were like a curse that nailed her to the cross in an instant. After Song Enya's words, she instantly felt that the whole world had turned gray. Just a few hours ago, she was woken up by an unknown number. She was taking an afternoon nap, but when she was awakened by the urgent ringtone of her phone, she glanced at the screen and saw that it was a number that she had never dialed before. She picked up the call suspiciously and heard Song Enya's cold voice on the other end. Yun sure. Yun sure immediately woke up from her drowsiness. Song Enya? She could tell at once that the Missy's voice was arrogant, contemptuous, and hostile. There was also an inexplicable sense of smugness in it. Yun sure sat up on the bed at once, her face turning frosty in an instant. "Song Enya, I heard that you went missing. Could it be that you've absconded, because of your guilty conscience?" "Yun sure, I have something to announce to you." Song Enya was not in the mood to care about her ridicule. Instead, she issued a challenge to her. 8 o'clock tonight at Queen Cafe in the city center. Be there or be square. With that, she hung up the phone without any explanation. I wonder what trick she's up to this time. Yun Shirshir did not want to pay much attention to it at first, but at 7 o'clock in the evening she was curious about what important thing Song Enya had to announce to her. Looking at the date on the wall, she felt restless. She thought that since Song Enya had asked to meet her in the city center, there was no need to worry about what tricks she would play. Besides, she had a score to settle with her. Mu Yaja went out early in the morning, saying that he had to discuss some important matters with a few of his men. It was already 7 o'clock, but he was not home. It seemed that he would not be back for dinner. Hence, Yun Shirshir gave the two Xiaobaos a few reminders and hurriedly left. By the time she reached the cafe, Song Enya was already there and had sent her the name of a private room. When the waiter led her to the private room and pushed open the door, she saw a face that she had not seen in a long time. Yun Shirshir, you're here. Surprisingly, the Missy's face did not show much hostility when she saw her, which was rather unusual. If it was in the past, the moment he saw her, he would definitely gnash his teeth in hatred. His eyes would be as sharp as a poisonous snake, as if he couldn't wait to swallow her alive. It was different today, though. She smiled elegantly. Her eyes were clear and her makeup was light. Unlike the heavy makeup she used to wear, her watery eyes and pink lips made her look very simple and elegant, but she was very charming. Song Enya was sitting at a table. When she saw her, she politely pointed to a seat and invited her to take a seat. This made her even more suspicious. Chapter 2144. However, the friendliness that Song Enya displayed on the surface made her seem like a completely different person. If it were not for that familiar face, she would really suspect that the woman in front of her was not Song Enya herself. Have a seat. Yun Shirshir did not stand on ceremony as she walked over and sat down opposite her. You asked me to come here this time because, what would you like to drink? Song Enya asked as she flipped through the menu. Yun Shirshir's expression froze for a moment before she said, a glass of Blue Mountain. Song Enya turned her head and immediately ordered, a glass of Blue Mountain. The waiter nodded and then respectfully left the room. At this point, the private room fell into dead silence. As Song Enya stirred the warm milk, the rich fragrance of milk immediately filled the room. The two of them sat quietly in silence. Yun Shirshir sized her up silently. She did not know what she was up to at this moment, but she had a feeling that she had ulterior motives for inviting her here. This woman was extremely vicious. As the saying went, one's appearance was born from one's heart. In the past, she did not think that this saying made much sense, but it was vividly reflected in Song Enya. Thinking back to the past, her incomparably mean face gave people a feeling of disgust. Yun Shirshir was silent for a moment. Just as she was about to speak to break the silence, Song Enya, who was sitting opposite her, broke the silence first. She raised her head and looked at her like a victor. She blatantly announced to her, do you know? I'm pregnant. In the apartment, the atmosphere froze for a long time. Mu Yanqing looked at Meng Qingxue in disbelief, his eyes full of shock and bewilderment. Seeing his stunned expression, Meng Qingxue mistakenly thought that he was shocked because he could not face such a big surprise. Her face became even more shy, as if she had put on rouge and was boiling hot. She pouted and buried her face in his chest, asking in a coquettish tone, Yanqing, are you unhappy? You're going to be a father soon. Perhaps it was because she was pregnant, but even though she was only 18 years old, the maternal instinct in her heart was already spreading because of the birth of a new life. Her face became softer than ever, and there was a holy and enchanting radiance about her. However, this kind of radiance was undoubtedly too dazzling to the point that it fiercely stung his eyes. For a moment, Mu Yanqing forgot to express his thoughts as he lowered his head and sized her up in a daze. Finally, his gaze landed on her still flat stomach. He was going to be a father soon, she was pregnant, how could this be? She even asked him if he was happy. How could he be happy? Right now, Meng Qingshue's joy and excitement formed a sharp contrast with his stunned and lifeless expression. Perhaps Meng Qingxue was too happy and immersed in the beautiful fantasy of the future, so she didn't care about his pale face at the moment. She pulled him to sit down on the sofa. Like a happy bird, she chattered to him, telling him the uneasiness and tension of being a mother for the first time, as well as her expectations and dreams for the arrival of the child in her belly. Chapter 2145. After all, Meng Qingxue was still young and did not understand what was wrong with her body. Hence, she hurriedly searched for relevant information on the internet and concluded that she might be pregnant. Meng Qingxue was nervous and uneasy. She went to the maternal and child health hospital for a series of checkups and finally got the result that she was 4 weeks pregnant. She was not prepared for the arrival of this child at all. That was because she was still so young, only 18 years old. Most girls of this age were still studying in school. Although she dropped out of school early because of her poor family background and entered society, she was only 18 years old after all. She was not mentally prepared at all. When the doctor saw her age and carefully asked where the child came from and if there was a need to abort it, she subconsciously refused. It was probably at that time when she saw the small shadow in the ultrasound that her maternal instincts could not help but stimulate her desire to protect her child. She used to hate children. Rather than saying that she hated them, it was more accurate to say that she rejected them. However, once she realized that she was about to become a mother, the joy she felt was indescribable. That was because she loved this man deeply, and the child in her stomach was their flesh and blood. Love the house, love the crow, and love for this child came from the bottom of her heart. She struggled with her thoughts for an entire night. She originally wanted to call him and ask for his opinion, but she remembered that he had said not to call and disturb his life unless it was especially important. After hesitating for a while, she put down her phone and finally decided to keep this a secret for the time being. It would not be too late to announce this to him when he arrived. It took her a few nights to adjust her state of mind. Meng Qingxue hugged him happily and said a lot of things excitedly. For example, she felt that her mentality had changed after she became pregnant. She also told him about her fantasies about the future. For example, after the child was born, she hoped that it would be a beautiful boy. However, if it looked like him, it would be good to give birth to a beautiful little princess. The customs in her hometown were used to favoring boys over girls. Meng Qingxue had experienced the persecution brought about by favoring boys over girls. Therefore, in her heart she would like both boys and girls. After all, this was his child. Finally, she leaned on his shoulder and suggested an idea. "Yanqing, why don't we get married?" Although she hadn't reached the legal age yet, in her hometown, many girls got married and had children at the age of 16 or 17. It wouldn't be too late to apply for a certificate when the children were older. The wedding could be held first. Meng Qingxue hoped that they could hold the wedding as soon as possible. Compared to being a mother, she hoped that she could hold his hand and step into the hall of marriage. This was something that she had always dreamed of. Meng Qingxue looked at him coquettishly. Her eyes were bright and clear, and her smile was brimming with happiness. It was as if she was certain that he would agree to this matter. Little did she know that Mu Yanqing had suddenly pried her hand away from his arm with an expressionless face and gave her a faint, mocking smile. "Impossible." Meng Qingxue was stunned, and the smile on her face froze. She repeated his words in a daze. Impossible? Chapter 2146. The smile on Meng Qingxue's face completely froze. Her hand, which had been broken free, slipped onto the sofa and she felt weak all over. Ignoring her disappointed expression, Mu Yanqing suddenly questioned her mercilessly. "Meng Qingxue, are you kidding me? Impossible, impossible. How can you be pregnant?" He was still in disbelief. How can this child be mine? Such a heartless and cold question was like a bolt from the blue to Meng Qingxue. It was as if her heart was being pierced by a needle, and it was bleeding profusely. How can this be? If this child isn't yours, who else can it be? She was almost crying as she questioned him back, tears streaming down her face. Mu Yanqing was touched by her tears. He was not without feelings for her. When he saw her crying and feeling dejected, his heart softened a little. Hence, his tone was no longer as cold and harsh as before. Instead, it softened a little. "Haven't you been taking the pill?" Like most men, he did not like to wear condoms, but he did not want to make any mistakes. Hence, he had been reminding her to take the pill. In the beginning, he even saw with his own eyes that she had taken the long-term contraceptive pill before he started having sex with her unscrupulously. Later on, she also promised him that no matter what, she would take the pill on time before doing so and would not cause him any trouble. He trusted her, so later on he did not supervise her anymore. "Haven't you been taking the contraceptive pill?" Meng Qingxue lowered her eyelashes in disappointment and nodded weakly. Suspicion flashed across Mu Yanqing's eyes. "Could it be that you stopped taking the pill?" "No." Meng Qingxue felt even more aggrieved. Her tears could not stop flowing. Her eyes were red and swollen and she looked pitiful. "I've never stopped taking the contraceptive pill. I've always kept my promise to you." "Then how can you be pregnant?" Mu Yanqing's voice grew louder. His eyes narrowed as he cursed inwardly. Could it be that, while he was away, she had attracted another woman outside and accidentally got pregnant? He did not express his suspicions, but how could Meng Qingxue not understand the look in his eyes? That doubtful and hurtful look was undoubtedly heart-wrenching. She shoved his shoulder hard and broke down in despair. Are you suspecting that I've done something to let you down? No. You really didn't? So, don't look at me like that, okay? If you doubt me and don't believe me, I can do a paternity test with you. Mu Yanqing's heart softened, but at this moment, his heart was in a mess. Even if he wanted to care about her feelings, he could not help it. He almost blurted out the next sentence, which was almost heartless. Qingxue, don't tell me that you used some unspeakable means to get pregnant with this child? Or did you secretly use those means to get pregnant with this child so that you can blackmail me into marrying you grandly and live a carefree life as a rich madam? The medical industry under the Mu family's name was vast. Furthermore, they had a private sperm bank that belonged exclusively to the Mus. This was a confidential and forbidden area that kept the sperm of several generations of the Mus. Chapter 2147. When Mu Yanqing was 18 years old, he had already frozen a batch of sperm. When he was 24 years old, he froze another batch of sperm of even better quality. He could not help but suspect that this woman had paid a price and used some tricks to conceive his child through artificial insemination. However, it was no wonder that Mu Yanqing would suspect such a conspiracy theory. Being born into a rich and powerful family like the Mu family, there were countless schemes and schemes. It was not as if no woman had resorted to such means before, so he was no longer surprised by it. After all, being born into such a family, such things were not uncommon. Hence, it was only natural that they would suspect Meng Qingxue. At first, Meng Qingxue did not understand what he meant. She widened her eyes and stared at him innocently. Yanqing, what do you mean by that? Don't play dumb. You should know what I mean. Mu Yanqing suddenly laughed coldly. Don't tell me you're pregnant with my child through artificial insemination. Meng Qingxue was stunned. She was surprised that there was such a way to get pregnant. Moreover, what was even more heartbreaking was that the man she loved so deeply actually suspected her of such a sinister scheme. When Meng Qingxue came back to her senses, her face was already wet with tears. Her heart was in unbearable pain as she said aggrievedly, "You actually suspect me of having sinister intentions. Yanqing, it's been so long, almost 3 years. We've been together for so long, but you've never believed me, have you?" She had always thought that as long as she maintained her original heart, was sincere enough, he would be able to understand her good intentions for him. All along she had never asked for anything from him. Even if she was sometimes in financial straits, she had never thought of using him. Yes. Every month he would transfer money to the account, but that little money was only taken out as a last resort for daily expenses. Basically, he had never squandered it. Most girls of her age wore beautiful clothes, branded bags, and exquisite makeup. However, she was the only one who wore no makeup and dressed simply. Even if it was ordinary skincare products, she would save as much as possible. When she first stepped into the modeling industry, she had a few close friends. But ever since she got pregnant with him, they had drifted apart and never contacted each other again. She was like a lonely person, silently living in a place that he had forgotten. In order to live with dignity, she had long exhausted all her strength. She thought that by doing this for him to see, he would be able to see her true feelings for him, pure and without a trace of impurity. Who didn't dream of being rich and powerful? In the past, all of her sisters in the modeling industry had advised her to leave this fickle man and find someone else. With her qualifications, it was not a difficult thing to find a man who would love and care for her in the palm of his hand. However, she had never expected that her sincere efforts, which were unknown to the public, would not only fail to move his heart of stone, but also cause him to make such conjectures. If she had such a scheming mind, she wouldn't be in such dire straits. But why couldn't this man understand her heart? In the end, it was because he didn't love her enough. Therefore, he couldn't empathize with her feelings. Chapter 2148. Yanqing, I love you. In order to love you properly, I've stopped touching the things that you hate and dislike. I've worked hard to work part-time and earn money to support myself. I want to let you know that I'm an independent woman who doesn't covet your wealth. But my family isn't well-to-do. I came out into society before I finished my studies. Reality is cruel and I can't find a decent job at all. Even so, I still fantasize about becoming more outstanding. Sometimes, I really wish that you were an ordinary man and didn't have such a good family background. At least, when I'm giving my heart to you, don't use such vicious thoughts to judge me. Meng Qingxue spoke from the bottom of her heart as tears streamed down her face. Mu Yanqing's heart softened in the end. However, he was puzzled. If she wasn't coveting his wealth, What exactly was so good about him that she was willing to pour her heart out for him? Growing up in such a family like everyone else, he was incomparably insecure. Therefore he was unscrupulous in climbing up the social ladder. This was because he understood that only power and wealth could give him a pitiful sense of security. Meng Qingxue said, "Other than the basic daily expenses, I haven't used much of the money from the account you transferred to me. Of course, you don't have to worry about me being hypocritical and casting a long line to catch a big fish. You may think that I'm very greedy, but I'm not. I'm not. Please don't say such hurtful words again. I just want to be with you. Is that wrong?" The last sentence was almost shouted out hysterically. Mu Yanqing sucked in a deep breath of cold air and hugged her tightly. "Qingxue, I'm sorry. Don't say any more." "I know." After a pause, he helped her to the sofa and sat down. After calming down, he casually picked up an apple from the table and peeled it for her while saying, "Actually, I came over tonight because I have something to tell you." Meng Qingxue was heartbroken. As if a fishbone was stuck in her throat, she could not say a word and could only sob. However, she heard him say lightly, "My family is planning to arrange a marriage for me. Second uncle ordered me to cut ties with you cleanly and prepare to accept the marriage. I came here this time to break up with you." Hearing this, Meng Qingxue felt suffocated. She cried out in grief, but her tears flowed even more violently. Mu Yanqing recounted his uncle's instructions to him and then changed the topic helplessly. "But, the truth is I do have feelings for you. On the way here, I swore that I'd make a clean break with you this time. But when I came here and saw you, in the end I was unable to bear it." Meng Qingshue's heart warmed at his words, and her face lit up like a radiant sunflower. Mu Yanqing's next words, however, plunged her into despair. Chapter 2149. In the future, if he's successful, I'll bring him back to the Mu family. You, on the other hand, may never have a proper status, but you don't have to worry about me mistreating you. I'll still promise you the glory and wealth that belongs to you. Second uncle's intention in arranging this marriage is to strengthen my power and support me to become the head of the Mu family. Once I become the head of the family, even if you give birth to a few more children, I'll still be able to bear the responsibility, let alone one. Don't worry, other than a proper status, I'll give you everything you want." Meng Qingxue leaned on him, feeling empty as she listened to him describe the blueprint for the future. Mu Yanqing calmed down at once. It was not that he did not expect the pregnancy. It was not that he could not afford to raise a child. His earlier agitation was just that he was not mentally prepared for it. The Mu family had always placed importance on descendants. Mu Linfeng originally wanted him to cut off all ties with Meng Qingxue, but if they had a child, things might be different. He could find a way to settle Meng Qingxue in a quiet, high-end neighborhood where she could nurture the fetus. After the child was born, he could assign a few nannies and a few confinement matrons to raise the child. It was not a big deal to have a few mistresses outside. It was not that the Mu family did not allow such a situation to exist. Moreover, as long as the family's descendants were capable enough, they would acknowledge it. Despite Mu Linfeng's appearance, he also had an illegitimate child outside. It was just that the children under him were disappointing and could not be brought into the family. It was just that he did not want Meng Qingshue's existence to interfere with his future ambitions in any way. Mu Yanqing also promised her that, although she could not replace his fiancé status as long as the child was born, they would still be like how they were now. He would often come to her place to accompany her and the child. He also promised her that she would enjoy endless glory and wealth in the future. She would be very happy and would no longer have to work for others and be bullied by others. She would also no longer have to live in such a cramped rented house. She would move into a high-class apartment and be treated like a rich lady. She would be treated like the moon surrounded by a myriad of stars, waiting on and waiting on. Other than enjoying life and taking care of the child, she would not have to do anything at all. She would not have to worry about not having a job or being hungry. It could be said that other than her status, she was no different from those rich young mistresses. If she knew how to manage things well, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get along with the legal wife. As for the status, there was no need for him to harbor any hopes. If he became the head of the family and had some ability, he would be able to give her a better life. In his opinion, those superficial appearances were not that important anymore. Mu Yanqing thought to himself, I've already said so much and even laid out so many tempting conditions. A sensible woman would be overjoyed by now. She would be hugging my arm and coquettishly fawning on me. At least that was what he thought. However, the moment he spoke, there was a long silence in the air. She still had her head lowered and did not say anything. However, her happy expression instantly darkened. Seeing that tears were about to fall again, He could not help but get angry. He impatiently asked, "What do you want? What do you want?" What a dignified question. He actually asked her what she wanted? Chapter 2150. Meng Qingxue threw caution to the wind and poured out all the displeasure in her heart. "What do I want? I don't want what you've said. What I want is you." "What do you mean? You don't understand me after all. I don't care about glory and wealth. I just want to be with you. I want to be your legitimate wife." As soon as she finished speaking, Mu Yanqing, "I think you're really insatiably greedy. That's all I can promise you. Think about it carefully. I'm such a man. I have my ambitions and my pursuits. I won't allow anyone to be my stumbling block, including you." With that, he walked to the door. Meng Qingxue was stunned for a moment before she chased after him. She saw that Mu Yanqing had already opened the door and half of his long leg had stepped out. He suddenly paused and turned around to look at her coldly. He threw an extremely cruel sentence at her. "If you've thought it through, give me a call. I'll arrange the rest for you. You just need to take care of your body, take care of the fetus, and give birth to the child without any worries. However, if you're unwilling to do so, then you can cut all ties with me. The child will either belong to me, or you can deal with the aftermath yourself." After he finished speaking, he slammed the door shut with a bang and left with a swagger. Meng Qingshua's heart ached terribly. She leaned against the door and fell to the ground in melancholy. Then she burst into tears. At a cafe. After Song Enya arrogantly announced her pregnancy, Yun Shishir inexplicably calmed down. She did not panic for a moment. Instead, she was unusually calm. She was very surprised by Song Enya's announcement. On the way here, she had guessed Song Enya's motive for treating her to coffee. However, when she proudly told her that she was pregnant, Yun Shishir sneered. At this moment of dead silence, the waiter knocked on the door and came in with a tray. He placed a cup of Blue Mountain coffee in front of her and left. Yun Shishir quietly warmed her palms with the cup of coffee in her hand. She could feel its boiling temperature when she heard Song Enya's shrill and arrogant voice ringing in her ears once more. "The child is already 3 weeks old. Brother Mu and I had it after he returned from Sea City. During that period of time, something must have happened between the two of you, right? That night he was dead drunk. When I helped him into the room, he might have mistaken me for you. He hugged me and then that happened." She paused for a moment before smiling bitterly. "I've always wanted Brother Mu, but I didn't expect that I'd end up becoming his woman because of you. However, it doesn't matter. Even if I can't get his body or his heart, I'll be satisfied even if he gives me a child." She smiled so brightly and proudly. In Yun Shishir's eyes, it was incomparably glaring. Even though she forced herself to calm down, her mind was still a mess. Returned from Sea City? At that time, Mu Yaja had indeed rushed back, but according to Qin Zhou, he had rushed back to the capital because of Song Enya's disappearance. She firmly believed in Mu Yaja. Chapter 2151. Furthermore, this man had always known how to control the situation at drinking gatherings. He had a sense of propriety when it came to alcohol and never allowed himself to lose his composure. It was impossible for him to get drunk. Song Enya sized up her expression and sneered mockingly. "What? You don't believe what I've said?" Yun Shishir looked up and met her gaze. Song Enya continued, "Do you not believe that I'm pregnant, or do you not believe that the fetus in my womb isn't Brother Mu's flesh and blood? Why should I believe you?" Yun Shishir turned to smile, but her face was unusually tense. "Song Enya, I see that you don't have any other abilities, but you're quite capable at sowing discord. Since you're pregnant, why didn't you tell him? Instead you came to me to fan the flames. Do you have ulterior motives?" "Yun Shishir, I said that you're too inexperienced, but you still don't know it. I think you've never really understood men from the beginning to the end." Song Enya smiled and continued, "Men have always been creatures who think for themselves. Oftentimes, biological impulses and primal instincts will overcome all rationality. Although Brother Mu is a very charming man, he's ultimately not a god. He'll also make some mistakes that men will make. I love him, so I have to believe him without hesitation. Things are just excuses to comfort myself." "Do you think I should believe you just because you say that?" "Song Enya, there's a limit to how shameless a person can be. You're from a prestigious family after all, so you don't have to lower yourself like this." Yun Shishir's cold gaze pierced into her. Song Enya chuckled and provoked, "If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask Brother Mu. I don't think Brother Mu would deny it, would he? However, if you really don't believe me, I can show you the evidence." As she spoke, she took out a craft paper bag from her bag and handed it over. Yun Shishir did not reach out to take it, So Song Enya pushed the paper bag in front of her with an elegant smile. What? Aren't you going to open it? Or is your confidence wavering now and you don't dare to face the truth? How could Yun Shirshir ignore such a provocation? She opened the paper bag, took out a few reports and skimmed through them. She didn't know how to read it. Then came the line at the end. Confirmation of biological parentage between W6829F and W1993D. This line of words was simple and easy to understand. This meant that they were related by blood. Yun Shirshir narrowed her eyes suspiciously and looked up at her. Without waiting for her to raise her doubts, Song Enya smirked and said coldly, "You don't have to doubt the authenticity of this paternity report. It's stamped by an official hospital, so everything is based on evidence. If you don't believe me, you can take this report to the hospital to check if it's officially issued. If the child doubts me, I can just do it again." She appeared to be in the right and was not afraid of any form of verification. This undoubtedly extinguished the confidence in her heart. Chapter 2152. Last night, due to the sudden turn of events, Muyaja seemed to have a lot on his mind, so he smoked quite fiercely. Later, when a few of his brothers came over, she took the opportunity to find a lighter in his coat pocket and stuffed it into her pocket. She suddenly sneered and took out the lighter. Ding! She opened the lid and lit it with a puff. She picked up the report with one hand and set it on fire at a corner. Amid Song Enya's terrified shriek, the flames suddenly jumped up and caught fire. Yun Shirshir threw the burning document in front of Song Enya in a dashing manner. Song Enya gasped in shock and hurriedly poured the warm milk beside her on it. Accompanied by spirals of smoke, the flame was slowly extinguished. "You." After Song Enya calmed down, she glared at her and questioned hysterically, "What exactly are you trying to do? You don't have to show me such things. Do you think that this can shake my so-called beliefs? Song Enya, don't take things for granted, you're too naive." Yun Shirshir coolly said this before she suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. Song Enya also stood up and chased after her aggressively. "Yun Shirshir, I'm warning you, you won't be smug for long. Tomorrow, I'll bring these paternity test reports to the Muse to seek justice for me. For the sake of the child, the Muse will definitely arrange a marriage between me and Brother Mu. I'll see who'll be the one in a sorry state then. You're so smug now, but you won't be for long." Yun Shirshir's back paused when she heard this. She calmly turned around and said, "Oh, then I'll wait and see." Her calm reply surprised Song Enya greatly. In order to have this child, she had paid an unimaginable price. During the difficult pregnancy, she had tried her best to adjust her body's condition. After the pregnancy was successful, she made some slight adjustments and flew back to the country without stopping. However, she did not look for Muyaja immediately. What was the use of looking for Brother Mu? She had used despicable means to obtain this child. Even if it was his flesh and blood, he might not necessarily acknowledge it. After resting for a while in a hotel in the capital, she went straight to provoke Yun Shirshir. Taking action from her would undoubtedly yield twice the result with half the effort. She had originally thought that when she told her everything, she might be suspicious. Therefore, she had prepared the paternity test in advance and was looking forward to throwing the report to her. Because of this, she would fly into a rage and rush home recklessly to cry and throw a tantrum with Brother Mu. She would vent her anger on him for all the grievances she had suffered. With Brother Mu's cold personality, it would be difficult for him to accept any doubts from the woman he loved deeply. The two of them would inevitably be estranged because of this. This was indeed a method to sow discord. She had set up a trap and was just waiting for Yun Shirshir to foolishly jump in and bury herself in it. After all, she had already brazenly provoked her. If it were any other woman, it would be difficult for them to remain calm. She did not believe that Yun Shirshir could remain calm. However, reality proved that Yun Shirshir was much more mature than she had imagined. Chapter 2153. Her carefree attitude made her turn pale with fright. Instead, it was her, the invader, who was flustered and unable to keep her cool. Song Enya suddenly sneered and forced herself to calm down quickly. "Just wait and see then. When the Muse make the necessary arrangements, I'll have to trouble you to abdicate your position and settle the divorce procedures as soon as possible." Yun Shirshir suddenly fell silent. Song Enya thought that she was panicking, so she continued fanning the flames and fanning the flames. "Why did you take things so hard back then? It's obvious that you and Brother Mu can't last long, yet you still shamelessly insisted on marrying him. Do you think that you can be together forever after getting married? Ah, you're really delusional." Yun Shirshir was obviously unmoved by her provocation. She was cold from the start to the end, but Song Enya completely ignored her indifference and continued. What happened in the end? Didn't I get kicked away by Brother Mu? When the time comes, the one who will truly be the matriarch of the Muse will be me. Ah. Yun Shirshir, however, raised a question. Matriarch of the Muse? Uh-huh. Song Enya said smugly. Why? Marrying Brother Mu, wouldn't that make her the rightful mistress of the Mu family? I'm more qualified than you. I come from a good family and have a superior background. Between us, the Muse will definitely side with me. The Song's influence isn't as simple as you think. With the help of the Song family, Brother Mu's future would be even brighter. What if he's with you though? He'll only attract more prejudiced gazes. Don't you know? You have a bad reputation in the Muse. Everyone laughs at you for being a broken shoe. If Brother Mu gets together with you, you'll only be a hindrance to him and drag him down. I, on the other hand, am different. I'll use my family's influence to help him climb to a higher peak. Yun Shirshir suddenly interrupted her passionate fantasy. Then I'll have to disappoint you. Song Enya was stunned for a moment, unable to react as she stared blankly at her. What do you mean? Yun Shirshir calmly said, he's no longer the head of the Muse. Song Enya's expression froze like ice. Yun Shirshir found her to be too laughable. She was just like a clown. Just as she was about to turn and leave, Song Enya angrily grabbed her hand and stopped her from leaving. What did you say? Brother Mu is no longer the head of the Muse? What do you mean? Yun Shirshir sneered contemptuously. Her next words were like a bucket of ice water splashed on her heart. It seems that you're not up to date with the latest news. I thought you should know that just last night, your brother Mu stepped down from his position as the head of the family and the CEO of the consortium in front of the elders of the Mu family. Sorry, I'm going to shatter your beautiful dream. Song Enya was stunned. She bit her lower lip hard. She had never expected such a situation to happen. Brother Mu had resigned as the head of the Muse. Why? Chapter 2154. But for some reason he had suddenly resigned. Why was that? She could not figure it out. Her vicious gaze suddenly landed on Yun Shirshir as she questioned her suspiciously. It's you, isn't it? Yes. It's all because of you, isn't it? She yelled at her aggrievedly and angrily. Brother Mu stepped down because of you, right? Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and smiled, but she admitted it honestly. Yes. Her two words were light as a feather, but they pierced the Missy's heart like an awl. She was completely stunned. Brother Mu actually gave up his position as the head of the Mu family because of me? How could this be? What kind of charm does this woman have to make an ambitious man like Brother Mu give up on the Mu group? I don't believe it. What? Why did it turn out like this? Song Enya still found it hard to believe. She kept muttering to herself, but she could not get an answer. Yun Shirshir kindly explained, that's because the Muse wanted him to make a choice between the head of the family and me. That's why this is his choice. Are you satisfied with this answer? Seeing that Song Enya was completely stunned, Yun Shirshir did not have the mood to entertain her any longer. She flung her sleeve aside and left on her own. The door was slammed shut with a bang. Song Enya fell to the ground weakly. Her eyes were blank as she looked haggard and lost her soul. Why? Yun Shirshir started the car and sat in it. She looked at the rearview mirror and saw that her face was a little pale. She tidied her hair, which had been messed up by the wind, but she still could not sort out her frustrated emotions. It was not that she did not trust him enough. She believed that this man, who was bold and responsible enough to give up his power for her, would never do anything to let her down. What kind of opportunity did he have to make Song Enya pregnant with his child? She had actually read through the report seriously. Because of her experience, she had some understanding of such matters. Generally speaking, it was impossible to fake a personal appraisal, unless one was extremely powerful. Only then would they have the ability to do so. Besides, Song Enya had already said that they could do another paternity test at any time if they wanted to verify it. She did not look like she was lying. She was really pregnant with his child. The results of the comparison showed that there was indeed a personal relationship between them. She did not know what kind of trick Song Enya had used, but the thought that the Missy was carrying her beloved man's child made her feel as if she had swallowed countless fish bones. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in her throat and it was extremely painful. She might not be able to be that carefree. How could Yun Shirshir not guess her niece's motive? She wanted to get pregnant with his child. She wanted to use her to sow discord between them, thus creating a gap between them and driving a wedge between them. Naturally, she would not allow her to achieve her goal just like that. However, there were some things that just couldn't be understood. She was not strong enough to control her emotions at will. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath, grabbed the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. When she reached home and opened the door, she saw Muyaja sitting on the sofa with his head lowered, flipping through the newspaper. Chapter 2155. After returning from Xingyu Financial Group and reaching home, the two little lads said that their mommy had left in a hurry. He called her and found out that she was on her way back. After giving her a few reminders, he sat back on the sofa and flipped through the financial newspaper he had just bought. As expected, an entire day had passed, and there was no news from the Mu Group. Perhaps the public relations department was preparing anxiously. Perhaps tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Mu Group would probably send out an official announcement of his resignation. Mu Linfeng was probably in a terrible state now. Dealing with it in such a way could minimize the negative impact of this matter. This was what he had to worry about now. At this moment he was probably gnashing his teeth in hatred. Muyaja heard the sound of the door opening and saw that a certain little woman had finally returned home. He smiled and said, "Why are you so late?" Yun Shirshir stood at the door, but she was not elated by his usual greeting. She leaned against the door and casually placed the car keys on the table. Thus, she leaned against the door and lowered her head, looking a little lonely and powerless. At this moment, her state could be described as gloomy. With her head lowered and her frown, Muyaja was also confused. He did not know what this little woman had gone through outside to come back with a stomach full of anger. But in reality? Along the way she comforted herself, but she still could not figure it out. Even in front of Song Enya she was arrogant and merciless in her ridicule. But when she turned around and was alone, she could not comfort her state of mind. On one hand, she could stand in Muyaja's position and repeatedly tell herself that he would not betray her. On the other hand, when she thought about how Song Enya was pregnant with his child, she felt sad and even jealous. There was a part of her that felt unbalanced in her heart. At the same time she felt greatly wronged. After all, think about it. Another repulsive woman used the fact that she was pregnant with her man's child to force her to abdicate. No one would be able to adjust their mood quickly. Given her conservative mindset, how could she have guessed that Song Enya had used her methods to steal the sperm to achieve such a pioneering feat of artificial insemination? Muyaja found that something was wrong with her. He suddenly got up and walked in front of her, but he saw that she kept her head down and didn't say a word. She looked very depressed. "What happened?" he asked. Yun Shirshir suddenly pushed him away expressionlessly and walked to the dining table. She poured herself a cup of cold water and gulped it down. It was only after she downed the glass of water that she seemed to have calmed down a little. Once she had calmed down, she raised her head and looked at the man, who had sat down beside her without saying a word, and finally said, "Song Enya asked to meet me today." Muyaja was also surprised. "She's back in the capital? Looks like you're not well informed enough." She didn't know why, but there was a bit of sarcasm in her words. It was as if she needed him to bear some of her unhappiness so that she could feel better. Chapter 2156. I'm not in the company anymore, so I naturally don't get the latest news. Yun Shirshir used a single word to express her displeasure. Muyaja was not annoyed. Instead, as if dealing with a sulking child, he gently rubbed her head with his large palm and asked gently, "What's wrong? You're back and you look so tense." "How can I be in a good mood after meeting AB*Tisich?" She retorted self-righteously, but because of the man's gentle patience, the anger in her heart subsided a lot. "What did she do to you? Tell me about it." Yun Shirshir gripped the glass of water tightly and suddenly exerted force. Perhaps she exerted too much force, so much so that the back of her hand vaguely showed green veins. She blew on her head with a gloomy expression. Her shoulders did not move at all, and there was no undulation as if she was brewing. Suddenly she said, "Song Enya told me that she's pregnant." "Song Enya is pregnant?" Muyaja, on the other hand, was not too surprised by this. He merely raised a brow but did not comment on it as he quietly observed her expression. Yun Shirshir continued, "I thought it was fake, but she took out a paternity test report. It said, there is a relationship between father and daughter. Tell me what's going on." "A paternity test?" "Yes. This kind of report can't be forged, right?" Yun Shirshir waited for him to give a reasonable explanation. But after waiting for a while, the man rested his chin on his hand and lazily said, "Oh." Yun Shirshir exploded. "What do you mean by, oh? Isn't he surprised? Isn't he going to ask what's going on? Could it be that he knew about Song Enya's pregnancy? But under normal circumstances, other than the person involved, who else would know about this kind of thing? The anger in Yun Shirshir's heart surged up again, filling her chest. She couldn't calm down and her eyes became red and swollen. She shouted at him angrily, "Aren't you going to give me an explanation?" Behind the wall, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion in the living room and quietly hid behind the wall. However, it seemed like something troublesome was going on and it was not convenient for them to show themselves. Hence, they could only hide behind the wall and eavesdrop. Muyaja suddenly chuckled. "I found out that you little guy can get jealous too." His tone, which was full of indulgence, did not extinguish the knot in her heart. Instead, it fueled her anger. "What are you talking about? Can you explain this matter to me?" She was not annoyed by Song Enya but by this man's cold attitude. Yun Shirshir glared at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she held it in because of her stubbornness. This was clearly such a serious matter, yet he was still laughing? He even used such a doting tone. Did he think that he could hypnotize her anger and calm her down? Yun Shirshir suddenly felt quite indignant, but she heard him suddenly ask, "Did she tell you that she's pregnant with my child?" "Yes." "Do you believe it then?" He stared at her seriously, wanting to hear her answer. Chapter 2157. Muyaja's heart warmed when he heard that. Then, in a gentle and charming tone, he asked her, "What other explanation do you want from me?" Yun Shirshir continued to pull a long face, stubbornly wanting an explanation. She pouted and said unhappily, "She couldn't have gotten pregnant for no reason, right? Could it be that the child in her stomach is a ghost fetus?" Muyaja suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Yun Shirshir struggled at first, pushing him awkwardly and pounding his chest with her little pink fists. However, her weak strength was nothing to him. The man reached out his other hand and stopped her easily. Seeing that she was about to flare up, he suddenly said, "The child in her stomach isn't mine." "What?" Yun Shirshir's eyes widened in shock. Muyaja laughed. "You heard it? How is that possible? If it's not your child, whose child could it be?" She had burned the report in a fit of anger. If it hadn't been burned, she would have brought it back and flung it at his face so that he could see it with his own eyes. "In the report she showed you before the paternity was confirmed, was there such a sentence at the end, excluding the interference of identical twins, close relatives and external help?" Yun Shirshir racked her brains for a moment and suddenly recalled that there was indeed such a sentence in the report. Seeing her pondering expression, Muyaja smiled. "Do you remember now? Looks like you're not stupid after all. You know how to read that sentence." He teased her, but Yun Shirshir slapped his hand away. "And then? What does this sentence mean?" Muyaja said casually, "In other words, if she's pregnant with someone else's child, a paternity test will also show that we're related." Yun Shirshir was stunned. "What do you mean?" Muyaja flicked her forehead in exasperation and snorted. "You little fool. Now you know how to be quiet? You looked like a crazy kitten just now." He coaxed her with just a few words. After she calmed down, Muyaja told her everything from the beginning to the end. Ever since Song Enya left the hospital without saying goodbye and went missing for a few days in Sea City, he quickly found out about her whereabouts. Through investigation he found out that this crazy woman wanted to secretly use artificial insemination to get pregnant with his child so that she could threaten him into marrying her. The Mews were in charge of a private sperm bank, where most of the Mews' resources were kept. Song Enya had bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank. After getting her hands on the stuff, she settled down in an American hospital. After a short period of recuperation and intense preparation for pregnancy, she finally succeeded. However, he had already found out about this matter and secretly arranged for the sperm she had stolen to be swapped with Mu Yanqing's. Furthermore, he had also destroyed all the sperm he had stored in the sperm bank. This was to prevent something like this from happening again. In fact, preserving genes was a common practice in the Mews. However, he had always scoffed at this kind of cooking. Chapter 2158. The reason why his sperm was kept in the sperm bank was because 7 years ago, Yun Shirshir wanted to be a surrogate for the Mu family. Initially, she had considered using artificial insemination. However, because her physical condition was not suitable for it, they changed the method. Muyaja just forgot to destroy it. It was all thanks to Song Enya, who reminded him that there was such a hidden danger. Hence this time he destroyed it all. However, the funny thing was that the quality of Mu Yanqing's sperm did not seem to be too good. Song Enya was completely in the dark and even suffered a lot in order to get pregnant. Test tube babies were very painful and costly. As the one who got pregnant, she had to suffer a lot. However, Song Enya did not hesitate and swore not to give up until she got pregnant. After a lot of torment, she finally succeeded. However, the funny thing was that the child she had tried so hard to conceive was going to disappoint her in the end. Although the paternity test report proved that they were related by blood, it was still because the child in Song Enya's stomach was his nephew. Oh. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows thoughtfully. So that's how it is. Oh. Mu Yaja imitated her tone and suddenly pulled her into his arms and ravaged her. Little fool, I wonder who was the one who was angry at me earlier. Now that you know the truth, your anger has subsided? His large palm could not stop ravaging and rubbing her face. Yun Shirshir knew that she was in the wrong, so she let him rub her face. It hurt a little, so she slapped his hand away and said angrily, I didn't know. How would I know that she would use such a shocking method to get pregnant with your child? How would I know that you've secretly replaced Mu Yanqing's sperm with yours? You didn't tell me any of this. How would I know? She felt extremely wronged. Yes, she was not calm enough, but any woman would remain calm and rational when faced with such conclusive evidence. She was angry and jealous because she cared too much about him. Her concern made her lose her mind. When the two little lads who were hiding behind the wall saw that the matter had been settled, they looked at each other in relief and returned to their room. Really? How old were they? This pair of clowns was still so worrisome. In the living room, Yun Shirshir was still a little angry. Song Enya had already come knocking on his door. Although he had received a satisfactory and reasonable explanation for the matter, he was still very unhappy about it. Are you jealous? He was half playful and half coaxing. His tone was gentle, but there was a hint of mischief in it. Yun Shirshir snorted and nestled in his arms. Her tone was rather coquettish. How would I dare? She's the little sister that you've always doted on. All these years, the one who's been by your side is her, not me. How would I dare to compare myself with her and covet her position in your heart? Before he could finish his sentence, a strong sour smell assaulted his nostrils, making him choke. Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't that he hadn't seen her jealous before, but it was the first time he saw her being so jealous. He rarely mentioned anything about Song Enya to her. However, this woman had heard about it from some unknown channel, so much so that she had a strong hostility toward his and Song Enya's past. Chapter 2159. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and retorted disapprovingly, Thoughts? What thoughts can I have? Yun Shirshir pouted at his nonchalant tone. She punched his chest again and muttered unhappily, I'm the one asking you. Can't you just answer me properly? The man asked shamelessly again, What kind of answer do you want? You? Yun Shirshir was exasperated. She crossed her arms over her chest and turned her face away, ignoring him. Seeing that she was really angry, Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. He had provoked her on purpose so that he could enjoy watching her get jealous over him. What she didn't know was that in his eyes she looked so cute when she was so spoiled. This little fool had always been so obedient and sensible in front of him. She was so sensible that she didn't seem like his girlfriend, but more like a virtuous sister. The problem was that he wanted her to be like a beautiful and delicate princess, the moon surrounded by stars, high above the masses, elegant and charming. Women like to be a little willful. In front of the man they loved, they would be a little mischievous and aloof. It was the dream of many women to be able to be doted on and treasured like a luminous pearl in the palm of their hand. But this woman, perhaps because of her circumstances, had an extremely insecure personality. Perhaps it was because she was so afraid of losing him that she rarely showed her most common instinct as a wife, jealousy, on her face. In front of him, there were many times when she was trembling with fear and trepidation. She didn't dare to be willful or unreasonable. Sometimes she would even show her fear that he would be angry. That kind of cautiousness made his heart ache and gave him a headache. He didn't want her to be so uneasy beside him. Compared to being obedient and sensible, he hoped that she would be more unreasonable, more arrogant, and more dependent on him. Even if she was really like those noble princesses, so what? It wasn't like he couldn't pamper her. The greatest love a man could give to a woman was to pamper her like a princess for the rest of his life. He reached out and pulled her into his arms again. Yun Shirshir snorted, obviously not wanting to bother with him. Even though she was pulled into his arms, she struggled a little. Her face was dark and she seemed to be sulking. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. My little fool, you're so cute even when you're jealous. She retorted in exasperation, Who said that I'm jealous? Mu Yaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Every expression on your face, every look, tells me that you're jealous. What do you think? She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, only to see him smiling playfully. Her face burned as if it had been doused with molten iron. She blushed in embarrassment, but she still stubbornly pouted. When did I? What jealousy, it's so weird. Be good. Don't let your imagination run wild between me and Enya. Muyaja had only said one sentence when Yun Shirshir glared at him with extreme sensitivity and gnashed her teeth. Enya. You call her so intimately. Cough. That woman. Muyaja hurriedly corrected himself. Yun Shirshir's expression then eased a little. She suddenly muttered with lingering fear, Actually, I've been thinking, what if your plan failed this time? Chapter 2160. Muyaja furrowed his brows. He did not understand what she meant when she said that the plan had failed. If you didn't replace your thing in time, and Song Enya got pregnant with your child, what would you do? Yun Shirshir looked up and stared at him seriously. She was eager to get the answer from him. Her question was because of her sense of security. Muyaja curled his lips, but his expression was full of arrogance. There are no ifs. If a man can't even control his own child, wouldn't he be a failure? What if you failed? It's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? What if? She stubbornly wanted to know what he would do if he were in such a situation. Would he still be as carefree as he was now when Song Enya got pregnant with his child? Muyaja pondered for a moment and then said without hesitation, I'll probably force her to abort the child. Abort? She stared at him with widened eyes and breathless eyes, feeling incomparably shocked. Abort? So cruel? Although she hated Song Enya and even loathed her, the child in her stomach was innocent. However, no one was surprised by his answer. This man had always been ruthless and cold. He would not leave any leeway for others. Such an answer gave her a great sense of security. To her, this was the best way to protect her. In this matter, Muyaja's choice was probably to minimize the harm to her. Even so, this man could be so decisive and cold at times that it made one's heart palpitate. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked, That's your flesh and blood. Can you bear to abort it? Muyaja lowered his head and pulled her into his embrace. He playfully caressed her red lips with his slender fingers, pressing them a few inches before gently caressing them. When he was done, he gently lowered his gaze to look into her eyes. Suddenly, he lowered his head and gently sucked on the corner of her lips. Yun Shirshir's red lips parted slightly. With a howl, she bit his fingertip. Her pearly white teeth rubbed against his fingertip and nibbled gently. However, she did not use much force, just like a kitten's bite. From his point of view, the woman sucking on his fingertip was a little too seductive, so much so that he immediately thought of another kind of extreme pleasure. Under such a visual impact, a certain part of him suddenly heated up. Even his body gradually became boiling hot. Yun Shirshir coquettishly said, In the future, mind your own business. Don't create such trouble again. Just as her voice fell, Yun Shirshir suddenly realized that her words seemed to have implied another embarrassing meaning. Her face instantly heated up. What do you mean by an acre of land? How could she not control herself and say such a dirty joke? He must have been a bad influence on her. When Muyaja heard this, he found it interesting and nodded. Okay, I'll mind my own business. Such a thing will never happen again. With that said, the man bent down and kissed her lips. After a charming and inseparable kiss, he hugged the back of her neck and pressed his lips against hers. He said seductively, My child can only have one mother. Chapter 2161. The man pecked her lightly before continuing. My child can only have one mother. It can only be you. Yun Shirshir was extremely moved when she heard that. She smiled warmly and hugged Muyaja back. Her heart was warm, and under her emotions she let out a heartfelt chagrin. Do you know? I'm indeed jealous of Song Enya. I'm jealous of her for being able to accompany you in your best years. I've been thinking that fate is really unfair. Why didn't I meet you earlier? How great would it have been if we had met earlier? Muyaja was stunned for a moment when he heard that. Then he laughed helplessly and looked at her dotingly. Gently tucking her hair behind her ear, he chided, Silly girl. Yun Shirshir remained silent as she snuggled into her husband's embrace, feeling extremely sentimental. The man's gentle voice suddenly sounded above her head. We didn't meet too late. Ha! I'd rather meet you later and be with you for the rest of my life. Yun Shirshir's eyes flickered. She had not expected Muyaja to say such touching words. This was probably the warmest thing he had ever said to her, wasn't it? She could not help hugging him tightly. Her hands clutched at his collar as tears welled up in her eyes. Shirshir, what you have is the best version of me. With that, he carried her in his arms and slowly walked into the bedroom. 11 o'clock at night. The night was getting darker. When Muyaja walked out of the shower and sat on the bed, he saw that the screen of his phone was lit up. Just as he picked it up, his ringtone suddenly rang. It was a call from a number. He glanced at it. It was an unknown number, but it was not difficult to guess who it was. He immediately guessed who it was. Muyaja sat at the head of the bed and casually lit a cigarette. Then he calmly answered the call. Song Enya's helpless and choked voice could be heard from the other end. He was never one to drag his feet. Now that his niece was back, he naturally had to make things clear. Firstly, he didn't want to be the scapegoat. Secondly, he was actually looking forward to the show that was about to unfold. Rumor had it that Mu Linfeng intended to arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing and had set his sights on the Lin family's third daughter. He was quite well informed in this regard. Although he was not in Mu Group now, the people in Mu Group were all his spies. It was easy for him to know every move of Mu Group. Now that Song Enya was pregnant, if the Muse were to find out that she was carrying Mu Yanqing's child, things would definitely develop in an interesting manner. As soon as he answered the call, he heard Song Enya's hoarse and choked voice. Brother Mu, what should I do? Woo. As she wept bitterly, she sought his pity. A certain part of a woman's nature was stimulated to the extreme at this moment. Women had always been more fragile and pretentious than men. At this moment, Song Enya tried her best to put herself in the most inferior position, only hoping that Muyaja would take pity on her. Even if it was just pity, she hoped that he would reach out and hug her. She really missed him. Chapter 2162. Muyaja took a deep puff of his cigarette but did not say anything. He just held the phone silently and listened to the sobbing sound from the other end. However, at this moment, her helplessness, confusion, and despair could not move him at all. He was already so disappointed with this woman that no matter how pitiful she looked, it would not make him feel any pity for her. She cried, Brother Mu, can you come and accompany me? I have something to tell you. Muyaja pondered for a moment before agreeing. Okay, where are you? A cafe in the city center. I'll wait for you in the private room of the restaurant where I treated you to drinks in the past. She desperately hoped that he would appear in front of her in the next second. Muyaja responded. Just as he hung up and put down his phone, he saw Yun Shirshir push open the door and walk into the bedroom. She saw him putting down his phone. Earlier in the bathroom, she heard him talking. He seemed to be on the phone with someone. She suspected that it was Song Enya who had called. In her vigilance, she rushed out without drying her hair. Muyaja could not help but laugh when he saw that she was full of vigilance. This little idiot is quite vigilant. Yun Shirshir cleared her throat and pretended to be calm as she asked, It's so late. Who called? Muyaja glanced at her and said calmly, Song Enya. I know it's her without guessing. Then why are you asking when you already know the answer? Yun Shirshir pouted and glanced at him. Actually, she just wanted to see if he would tell her the truth. After all, in the past he would never tell her anything no matter what. However, ever since she complained to him about this problem that day, this man paid special attention to this aspect and improved a lot. At least, no matter what she asked, even if it was about company matters and she did not understand, he would tell her seriously. Seeing that he did not deliberately hide it from her, she pursed her lips and said, I guessed that she would call you. She must be looking for you because of the child in her stomach, right? Poor thing. She probably naively thinks that she's pregnant with your child and wants you to take responsibility for it. Thinking about it this way, it was extremely scary. This man was really super scheming. When he knew that Song Enya was pregnant with his child, he was not angry about it. In a situation where he did not say a word, even someone as vigilant as Song Enya did not notice his trick. He actually carried out his plan without anyone knowing. Furthermore, he was at ease watching Song Enya, like a clown, go through all the trouble and suffering and finally get pregnant with his child. Fortunately, he was able to maintain his composure. Under such circumstances, he was still able to calmly come up with such a meticulous plan. If he did not have some tricks up his sleeve and shrewdness, he would not be able to achieve such a position. Still, after witnessing his style of doing things, she could not help but be surprised. For such a man, one would either be on the same side as him. If one were to become his enemy, one would definitely be played in the palm of his hand and die without knowing how. Thinking of this, Yun Shirshir felt better and silently sympathized with Song Enya. She would not die if she did not seek death. The sins of heaven could be forgiven, but the sins of one's own doing were the hardest to bear. She had to bear the consequences of her own actions. Chapter 2163. Muyaja nodded. Yun Shirshir said, Go ahead then, since she wants to see you. Muyaja was a little surprised. You're so assured that I'll go? What else can I do? Yun Shirshir suddenly fiddled with her hair, which was still a little wet, and smiled coquettishly. It's already so late. I don't believe that you'll abandon your beautiful wife for another woman. He wouldn't dare, Muyaja chuckled and suddenly said, "I'll give you 10 minutes to blow-dry your hair." His domineering tone was just like his style. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes. "What?" Muyaja stubbed out his cigarette and took a deep breath. Then he slowly got up and walked to her side. He grabbed her hand and kissed her fingertips. "You'll go with me?" Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on her lips. "Okay." Half an hour later, Muyaja drove over. After parking the car, Yun Shirshir got out and looked up. She broke out in a cold sweat. "Isn't this the place where Song Enya asked me to meet? Could it be that she hasn't left after so long? It's already 11 at night. The cafe should be closed by now, right?" Muyaja locked the car and walked forward to hug her. Seeing her dazed expression, he looked down and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Let's go in." Yun Shirshir smiled at him, only to see the man reach out and interlock his fingers with hers tightly as they walked into the cafe together. As soon as the two of them entered, the waiter hurried over and said with a trembling smile, "Hello, both of you. I'm sorry. We're already closed. I have an appointment with someone to meet me here." As soon as he said that, the waiter came to a realization and shook his head helplessly. "Is that lady right? Actually, our cafe is already closed, but she seems to be in a bad mood. She's sitting alone in the private room looking very down. We're too embarrassed to say anything. If it's convenient for you, please talk to her. We're in a hurry to get off work." The cafe was supposed to close at 10, but it was already 11 now. Naturally, they could not get off work if the customer did not leave. Yun Shirshir nodded. The waiter led them to the door of the private room and said with a smile, "This is the place." With that, he pushed the door open. Inside the private room, Song Enya stood up agitatedly when she heard footsteps coming from outside. "Brother Mu is here. So fast." She had originally despaired and thought that he probably wouldn't show up tonight. She did not expect him to still show up. It must be because he still can't forget her? He must still have some feelings for her. As long as that was the case, everything would be much easier. Song Enya knew Muyaja best. He had always been a sentimental person. Although she had done a lot of things to anger him in the past, they were still very close to each other. Moreover, she was pregnant with his child now. He would definitely take responsibility for her. With such hope in her heart, Song Enya quickly walked to the door. When she saw Muyaja halfway through the door, a bright and beautiful smile appeared on her face as she called out gently, "Brother Mu." Thus, she was touched and rushed over, wanting to throw herself into his arms. Chapter 2164. When Yun Shirshir walked in behind him, Song Enya froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body stiffened as if ice water had poured over her head, and she could not move an inch. Yun Shirshir. Why is she here? How could she forget? Now that Brother Mu was with her, the two of them were already married and had a grand engagement ceremony, she should have been beside him when she called him. How could I not think of that? Still, why did Brother Mu bring me here? Was he worried that I would be worried? But in the past, he was not such a man who cared about others. He had always been swift and decisive in doing things. He was rarely so meticulous, and it was all because of a woman. At the thought of this, Song Enya's face fell. Muyaja and Yun Shirshir walked into the private room and saw her standing there alone. Although the room was brightly lit, she seemed to be surrounded by darkness and was lifeless. "Didn't you ask me to talk to you about something important?" Muyaja hugged Yun Shirshir and sat down calmly. "Have a seat." Song Enya stood rooted to the spot for a long time before she reluctantly turned around and sat down opposite them. She kept struggling in her heart. If Yun Shirshir were to follow them, then she would be in a very passive situation. Some things were not easy to say in front of her. Song Enya held the glass in her hand. The milk in it had already turned cold. Ever since her pregnancy was confirmed, she had been very careful about the child in her womb, afraid that she would not be able to protect this precious bone. This was her last bargaining chip. It was considered a desperate throw. If she could not protect it, then all her efforts would be in vain. Therefore she was very careful in everything. The waiter walked in and asked politely, "Would you like to order anything?" Muyaja took the menu gracefully and turned his head gently to ask, "Wifey, what would you like to drink?" Wifey. She had already changed her way of addressing him so intimately. Song Enya lowered her head and sat where she was, clutching the corner of her dress. Just these two words were enough to stab her to the bone. The two people opposite him were constantly discussing what to drink and dessert to eat. Sometimes they would bicker and sometimes they would look at each other and smile. They were so intimate and tacit that they didn't look like a newlywed couple at all. Instead, they looked like a couple who had been married for several years and still had a stable relationship, loving and warm. What was this? Was he putting on an act for her? This must be Yun Shishir's plan. She wanted to use the opportunity to show off her affection with Brother Mu in front of her to deal a blow to her. Since when had Brother Mu been so gentle to a woman? Song Enya was jealous and sad at the same time. It was as if a healed wound had opened up again, only to discover that it had festered and turned into pus. No coffee. I want to drink coffee. Muyaja didn't care about her argument. He turned his head and instructed the waiter, warm up a glass of warm milk and half a bath. Another espresso, no drinks. Okay. The waiter smiled as he placed the order. Madam, your boyfriend dotes on you very much. He's so considerate. You two look so loving. Chapter 2165. We're already married. As he spoke, he held Yun Shishir's hand and interlocked their fingers. The diamond rings on their ring fingers were undoubtedly a declaration that they were officially husband and wife. The waiter was caught off guard and stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. He apologized. Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. But seeing how young you are, I thought you were a young couple. I hope you'll be happy for a long time. The envy in his words made Song Enya feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. Watching the person she loved embrace another woman and receive the envious blessings of others was like sharp thorns stabbing into her heart. The pain was unbearable. Song Enya picked up the glass with trembling hands. Just as she was about to take a sip of milk, she accidentally knocked the glass of milk over on the table, perhaps due to her absent-mindedness. Ah! She screamed uncontrollably, interrupting the harmonious atmosphere in the private room. The waiter glanced at her and saw that the glass of milk had been knocked over on the table. The milky white liquid dripped all the way down the table and wet the hem of her dress. Be careful. The waiter kindly walked forward, picked up a clean cloth in his hand and wiped her clean. Seeing the other's hand reaching for her dress, Song Enya reflexively protected her lower abdomen and swatted the other's hand away. Don't touch me. The waiter waved his hand and retreated to the side, feeling extremely uneasy. Song Enya came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously lost her composure. She immediately blushed and said, I'll wipe it myself. Oh! The waiter politely handed her a white cloth. Song Enya took it with trembling hands and began to wipe it carefully. Perhaps it was because she had experienced too much pain during the pregnancy process that her personality had become especially sensitive and neurotic after this period. Her desire to protect the fetus in her womb had exceeded the scope of a normal mother. Her level of caution was so high that others would think that she was neurotic. After wiping it clean, Song Enya handed the white cloth back to the waiter. The waiter asked, Do you need another cup of warm milk? Okay. Still no sugar? Yes. After placing the order, the waiter respectfully retreated. Song Enya lowered her head and leaned weakly against the sofa. Her face was pale as if she had collapsed. Yun Shishir glanced at her and then lowered her head to play games on her phone. Since Song Enya had made an appointment with Muyaja, she naturally would not say anything. She was just here to accompany him. In other words, the man probably wanted to use this method to completely destroy the last bit of obsession she had for him. Muyaja had made up his mind to use such a cruel method to draw a clear line between him and his niece. Most likely, no woman would continue to pester her beloved man after seeing such a loving scene with his beloved wife. Unless the person was extremely thick-skinned. Still, Song Enya should belong to the latter. Otherwise, she would not have been so crazy as to use test tube babies and try to conceive his child at all costs. Muyaja turned his face to Song Enya, but compared to the gentleness he showed to Yun Shishir, his expression was cold and indifferent. He asked, Why did you ask me to come here? Chapter 2166. He had already found out about Song Enya's pregnancy from Yun Shishir, but he wanted her to say it herself. Since she was so shameless, he might as well completely crush her last bit of dignity. He was heartless and cruel to a person who no longer had any feelings for. Song Enya remained silent. Her face was red, and she did not know how to open her mouth in front of Yun Shishir. Previously, she had announced to Yun Shishir that she had a one-night stand with Brother Mu, which resulted in this child. This was just her way of sowing discord. But in reality, such a thing did not exist. She originally wanted to ask Brother Mu out alone and use both hard and soft tactics, hoping that he would take responsibility for his child and give her an explanation. She also wanted to sow discord between him and Yun Shishir. However, in front of Yun Shishir, she really did not know how to smooth things over. If he were to ask where the child came from, how should she answer? If Yun Shishir was not around, she could tell him the truth. After all, she was already pregnant, and Brother Mu would not do anything to her. However, Yun Shishir was around. Did she have to expose the lies she had told before? That would undoubtedly be slapping her own face. Seeing her conflicted look, Muyaja lost his patience and took a cigarette in his mouth. He did not know if he did it on purpose or not, but he lit it. As soon as he lit it, the air in the room became stuffy. After 2 puffs, the room was already filled with smoke. Song Enya's nerves flared up all of a sudden. She lifted her head only to see the man sitting opposite her puffing away. Her heart was filled with grievances, and tears gushed out of her eyes at once. "Brother Mu, can you put out the cigarette? I am pregnant." Pregnant? Muyaja was not in a hurry to put out the cigarette. He watched expressionlessly as she covered her mouth and nose with a wary and disgusted expression. Instead he found it funny. "How did you get pregnant?" Song Enya was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer this question. Poor Song Enya, however, had no idea that the 2 men sitting in front of her had already figured her out. She was still trying hard to cover up the ugly things she had done, but in reality Muyaja had already seen through her tricks. At this moment they were treating her like a joke. Song Enya dared not take a deep breath. She covered her mouth and nose as tears streamed down her face. Choking on her tears, she confessed, "I'm pregnant with your child." "My child?" Muyaja laughed coldly and questioned her, "How did you get pregnant? I don't remember anything happening between us." His words were undoubtedly meant to embarrass her. However, since she had already said so, she couldn't care less about her dignity and face. Since she had already lost all faith, she might as well tell him everything. She might as well be hysterical. She was barefooted, so why would she be afraid of Yun Shirshir, who was wearing shoes? Chapter 2167. I'm pregnant. No matter what method I used, I'm indeed pregnant with your child. Now the child is almost 4 weeks old. I hope you'll take responsibility for this child and me. As soon as she finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's face remained calm, but she sneered inwardly. This Song Enya was making herself sound so dignified. She actually wanted him to take responsibility? On what basis? She had a child for no reason and wanted to use it as a bargaining chip. Aren't you being a little too naive? Muyaja put out the cigarette in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to expose her. Instead, he remained calm and pretended to listen patiently. Seeing that he did not refute her, Song Enya felt a little more confident. She glanced at Yun Shirshir and then looked at him. I heard from this woman that you gave up the position of the head of the Mu family for her. Is that true? If that's really the case, Brother Mu, are you crazy? Looking at the entire Mu family, which one of them didn't fight to the death for this position? You actually gave up this position for her. Why did you take things so hard? Muyaja was very indifferent to her questioning. Took things so hard? You're wrong. I'm sick of it. It has nothing to do with her. Song Enya was stunned. He was defending her. He was still defending her at this time? How much did he value this? At that time, in order to seize the position of the head of the Mu family, he almost went all out and swept away 1,000 soldiers to sit in that position. How could he be so carefree now? This was not like him. In her heart, he had always been an ambitious schemer with extraordinary ability and charisma. Now he was actually using the words, "I'm sick of it," to excuse himself. If this was not protecting her, what was it? Brother Mu, what do you mean by sick of it? This woman doesn't know, but I've always seen it. How much have you sacrificed for the Mu Group and Dishing Financial Group? How can you be so carefree? It must be the muse who made you choose between being the head of the family and her. Do you know the consequences of your hot-headedness? All your years of hard work have gone down the drain. Are you really willing to accept this? Willing? How could he be willing to accept this? However, he could only give up everything that belonged to Mu Group for a short period of time. Sooner or later he would take it back with interest. At this moment, the waiter pushed the door open and walked in. He placed the milk and coffee in front of the door and left. Song Enya calmed herself down for a moment before forcing a smile on her face. As if to encourage him, she told him smilingly, "The reason why the muse don't acknowledge her is that she's not worthy of you. But I'm different. My father is the mayor. You should know the status of the Song family in Beijing and the background behind them. If I'm with you relying on my mother's influence, your future will only be brighter. Perhaps the elders of the Mu family would have some misgivings about me before this. But things were different now. I'm pregnant with your child. The child in my belly is a boy. As long as I give birth to a son for you, your position will only be more stable." Mu Chichi thought to herself. At that time, who would be able to shake your position? But if you're with this woman, she'll only drag you down. Chapter 2168. When Yun Shirsher heard this, she could not hold it in any longer and retorted sarcastically, I don't think that a woman who would use unscrupulous means to blackmail someone with a child can say such words. Song Enya, don't be too self-righteous. I won't be a burden to him. You have no right to criticize me on this. Song Enya pointed at her hysterically and said angrily, it's not your place to lecture me. Instead of getting angry, Yun Shirsher laughed and said mockingly, it's not your place to lecture me either, is it? I'm warning you, if you have something to say, say it. Don't make me unhappy when the time comes and kick you into miscarriage. Her domineering and ruthless words made Song Enya shudder in fear. She subconsciously covered her lower abdomen and complained tearfully, how dare you? Do you think I wouldn't dare? Do you want me to kick you for you to see? As Yun Shirsher said this, she clenched her fists tightly. She had wanted to do this for a long time. If it were not for the fact that the child was innocent, she would have kicked the missy when she was pestering her earlier. Song Enya narrowed her eyes and sneered. A woman's heart is the most vicious. Let Brother Mu see your true colors. With that, she looked at Mu Yaja and complained, Brother Mu, listen to this. These are the words of the woman you've been protecting all this time. You actually want to harm me and your biological child. Who said that the child in your stomach is my flesh and blood? Mu Yaja suddenly said this lazily. He stretched out his arm lazily and hugged Yun Shirsher's shoulder. It was a casual gesture, but it showed that he was protecting her. Song Enya's heart sank when she saw this. However, she soon realized what Mu Yaja had said earlier and shuddered. She immediately retorted righteously, Brother Mu, don't you believe what I said? If you don't believe me, we can do a paternity test. Song Enya, do you really think that you can get pregnant with my child without my knowledge through artificial insemination? Mu Yaja interrupted her coldly. His words were filled with mockery and contempt. Song Enya was stunned. Brother Mu, what do you mean by that? Mu Yaja took a sip of coffee and smiled, but his tone was so cold that it was almost cruel. I think you probably bribed the higher-ups in charge of the sperm bank so that you could get what you wanted. In order to achieve his goal, he was willing to do whatever it took. However, I'm sorry to inform you that while you were preparing for pregnancy, I've already sent someone to make a swap. Hence you're carrying Mu Yanqing's child now. Her words had, without a doubt, mercilessly nailed the missy to a bloody cross. She widened her eyes in disbelief as she stared at his handsome face with a ferocious and unfocused gaze. Her mouth was wide open, but she could not utter a word for a long time. After a long futile effort, she finally squeezed out 3 words. Impossible. Ha! Impossible. Impossible. She had meticulously planned this plan. To ensure that nothing would go wrong, she went through with the IVF surgery. Now, he was telling her that the sperm had been swapped and that the child in her stomach was actually Mu Yanqing's. How could this be?